Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto became the Pirate King and got a harem of every princess? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Maelstrom of Uzu. The sea did not churn. It breathed. It was a single, monstrous lung, inhaling with a groan that drew the waves into towering peaks, and exhaling with a roar that shattered them into a maelstrom of white foam and black water. This was the Grand Charybdis, the ocean's untamable heart, a place where compasses spun like drunken dancers and cartographers abandoned all hope, scrawling, "Here be monsters," with a trembling hand. Aboard the Rasengan, the chaos was just another Tuesday. The ship itself was a contradiction, a vessel of impossible grace. Carved from the pale, chakra-infused wood of a mythical tree. Its hull was sleek and lean, more akin to a predator than a galleon. It had no broadside cannons, no cumbersome rigging. A single, enormous mast held a crimson sail emblazoned with A.S. Whirling black spiral, the crest of the forgotten Uzumaki clan. The ship didn't fight the waves, it danced with them, cresting a behemoth swell with a shriek of wind, then diving into the subsequent trough. With a gut-lurching drop that would have snapped a lesser vessel in two. At the helm stood Jiro, a man as weathered as the sea itself, his hands gnarled around the wheel, his face a roadmap of scars and sun-bleached wrinkles. He chewed on an unlit cigar, his gaze fixed on the liquid mountains ahead. "She's angry today, Captain," he grumbled, his voice like gravel grinding on stone. "Feels personal." "The sea doesn't do personal, Jiro," a voice answered, vibrant and clear, cutting through the gale. "It's just free. Does what it wants." Captain Naruto Uzumaki stood on the prow, balanced on he railing as if it were a solid patch of earth. The wind whipped his golden hair into a frenzy and tugged at the lapels of his long, black coat, the inside of which was a brilliant, fiery orange. He wore no hat, no pirate regalia, just simple black pants and boots. He was a beacon of impossible warmth and color against the monochrome fury of the storm. His eyes, a shade of blue so intense they say, meant to be a piece of the sky a god had lost, were closed. He wasn't looking, he was feeling. The wind spoke to him, a language of pressure and temperature. The water below told him its secrets, its currents and its depths. And carried on that wind, a scent, faint and foul. The stench of unwashed bodies, of despair, of rusted iron. And something else, a flicker of malice, a greedy, avaricious intent. "Ken," Naruto called out, his voice never rising, yet carrying perfectly to the lookout perched high on the mast. 3 points off the starboard bow. "You see it?" Ken, a wiry young man with eyes like a hawk, pressed a strange, single-lensed spyglass to his face. "Aye, Captain, a fat one, a celestial-class merchantman, flying the flag of the Don Quixote Syndicate. Triple-decked, gun ports armed. She's running heavy, sitting low in the water. Too low for just cargo." Naruto's eyes snapped open. The sky blue hardened into something as sharp and unforgiving as glacial ice. "They're not merchants. They're slavers." He took a deep breath, and for a moment, the air around him seemed to grow still, heavier. Faint orange pigment blossomed at the corners of his eyes, his pupils shifting from round to the horizontal bar of a toad. Sage mode settled over him, not like a power-up, but like a man shrugging on a familiar coat. The world bloomed into a symphony of sensory information. He could feel the heartbeats on the distant ship. Hundreds of them. Most were frantic, terrified, fluttering like trapped birds. A few dozen were steady, cruel, and bored. "Get us closer, Jiro." "Run silent," Naruto commanded. He turned, a grin spreading across his face, a flash of pure, unadulterated excitement. It was the grin of a predator that had just found its prey. "Time to make some trouble." Jiro returned the grin, his teeth stained brown. "My favorite kind of trouble, Captain." He spun the wheel, and the Rasengan responded instantly, dipping its port side into a churning wave and using the momentum to pivot. Slicing through the water with unnatural speed, its crimson sail now angled to catch the wind in a way that should have been impossible. The ship wasn't just sailing, it was being pushed by an unseen force. A gale only it could feel. The slaver ship, the gilded cage, was a behemoth of dark wood and tarnished brass, a floating fortress designed to intimidate. Its captain, a portly noble named Baron von Hesse, stood on his quarterdeck, sipping wine from a crystal goblet while his men secured the rigging against the storm. "Filthy weather," he sneered, wiping a drop of spray from his silken sleeve. "Hurry it up. The buyers in the South Blue pay double for stock that hasn't been seasick. I want them fresh for the market." A guard beside him shivered. "Sir, this is the Grand Charybdis. They say the maelstrom of Uzu haunts these waters. A ghost ship with a demon at its helm." Von Hesse laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Fairy tales to scare children. Nothing can touch the gilded cage. We have 100 men and 50 cannons. Not even the Navy is foolish enough to." He trailed off. A shape had emerged from the curtain of rain and mist. It was sleek, fast, and impossibly agile. It bore a single, blood-red sail with a black spiral. "Sir," the guard stammered, his face draining of color. "The ghost ship. Sound the alarms." Von Hesse shrieked, dropping his goblet. "Ready the cannons. Blow them out of the water." Bells clanged across the deck. Gun ports slammed open, the black maws of cannons emerging. Men scrambled, shouting orders. But it was too late. The Rasengan was already upon them, surging alongside the larger ship like a shark sidling up to a whale. No grappling hooks were thrown. No boarding planks were lowered. There was only a blur of black and orange. Naruto vaulted from his own ship's railing. A 60-foot chasm of raging sea between the two vessels. He didn't leap. He was launched, a gust of wind erupting at his heels, propelling him across the gap in a silent, breathtaking arc. He landed on the gilded cage's main deck as softly as a falling leaf. For a heartbeat, there was silence. The slavers stared, bewildered. He looked like a boy, barely a man, with hair like sunshine and a disarming smile. Then, the smile vanished. "All right, here's the deal," Naruto announced, his voice ringing with an authority that belied his appearance. "This ship is now under my protection. Your business is concluded. Lay down your arms, and you get to live. Simple, right?" A hulking brute with a cutlass and a face like a bulldog sneered. "One man. Get him." The deck erupted. A dozen men charged, blades held high. Naruto didn't move. He simply held up a hand, a sphere of swirling, chaotic blue energy a little larger than his palm forming in an instant. The sound it made was unique. A high-pitched whirring like 1,000 angry birds trapped in a bottle. A Rasengan. He didn't thrust it forward. He just dropped it. The moment the sphere touched the deck, it didn't explode. It ground. The wood splintered, groaned, and then disintegrated in a spiral pattern, a perfect circle of destruction boring straight through the main deck and the one below it. The charging slavers stumbled back, their eyes wide with terror as they stared at the gaping, smoking hole. "That was a warning," Naruto said, his tone conversational. "The next one won't be aimed at the floor." From the shadows of the rigging, more figures dropped onto the deck. 10 of them, 20, all identical to the first, each with the same icy blue eyes and determined expression. Shadow clones. They moved with silent, synchronized efficiency, disarming men, their movements a blur of orange and black. One clone would use a gust of wind to knock a sword from a man's hand while another would appear behind him, a kunai held to his throat. It wasn't a battle, it was a disassembly. In the bowels of the ship, chained in the suffocating darkness of the cargo hold, the world was a cacophony of terror. The rocking of the ship, the shouting from above, the splintering of wood. For the hundreds of men, women, and children packed into the filth, it was just the prelude to another horror. Among them, a young woman with dark blue hair, cut short and practical, pressed herself against the damp wall. She wore the same rags as the others, her face smudged with grime, but her eyes held a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. She was known to the others only as Miss Wednesday, a quiet, watchful presence. She was Nefertari Vivi, crown princess of the Alabasta Kingdom, and she had gotten herself captured intentionally, hoping to trace the slave trade that was funding the warlord tearing her country apart. She had thought herself prepared for the depths of human cruelty. She was wrong. Suddenly, a section of the ceiling above them simply vanished. Not blasted, not broken, but gone, leaving a perfect, square hole. Sunlight, weak and gray but glorious, streamed in. A figure dropped down, landing lightly amidst the prisoners. It was one of the clones. He didn't speak. He just moved. His hands flew, a blur of motion. With each tap, a lock on a chain or a shackle on a wrist clicked open. He moved through the hold with impossible speed, a whirlwind of liberation. The prisoners stared, too stunned to move, to speak. Miss Wednesday watched, her strategic mind analyzing, assessing. This wasn't the clumsy brutality of a pirate raid. This was precision. This was power used with purpose. On the deck, the real Naruto faced Baron von Hesse, who now had a sword pressed to the throat of a young slave boy. "Stay back, demon," the Baron shrieked, his jowls trembling. "One more step and the boy dies. I'll kill them all." Naruto stopped. The clones paused their silent work. The sage mode in his eyes sharpened, seeing not just the man, but the frantic, panicked life force within him. He saw the terror, the desperation, the pathetic excuse for a soul. "Let the kid go," Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. "Never. You pirates are all the same. You want my treasure, is that it? Take it. Just let me go." Naruto shook his head slowly. "You still don't get it. I'm not here for your gold." He took a single, deliberate step forward. "I'm here for them." Von Hesse's eyes widened in panic. He tightened his grip on the boy. But before his blade could even break the skin, a flicker of movement came from behind him. One of Naruto's clones, which had seemingly been subduing a guard 20 feet away, dissolved into a puff of smoke. At the exact same instant, the real Naruto vanished from where he stood. He reappeared directly behind the Baron, moving faster than the eye could follow. He didn't use a weapon. He simply chopped the back of the man's neck with the side of his hand. It made a dull thump. Baron von Hesse's eyes rolled back into his head, and he crumpled to the deck like a sack of wet laundry. Naruto caught the boy before he could fall, ruffling his hair gently. "You're safe now," he said, his voice soft. The boy just stared, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Naruto turned to the remaining slavers, now disarmed and surrounded by his clones. "Tie them up," he ordered. "Leave them enough food and water for a week. We'll set the ship adrift. The Navy can sort them out." He walked to the edge of the hole he'd made in the deck and looked down. Hundreds of faces, pale and frightened, looked up at him from the darkness. He saw their fear, their cautious hope. He knelt, his expression softening completely. "It's over," he called down, his voice echoing in the cavernous hold. "You're all free." He formed a new seal with his hands. Shadow clone jutsu. More clones popped into existence, dropping into the hold to help the weak and carry the injured. Vivi watched him from the shadows of the hold. She saw the raw, overwhelming power that had dismantled a slaver crew in minutes. But she also saw the gentleness with which he spoke to the child, the genuine relief in his eyes as he looked upon the people he'd saved. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a ghost. He was something else entirely. Something her world, choked by corruption and calculated cruelty, desperately needed. Later, the storm had passed, leaving behind a bruised purple sky and a gentle swell. The gilded cage was a distant speck, left to the whims of the current. The freed slaves were now guests aboard the Rasengan. The ship, which had seemed so lean, now felt miraculously spacious. The crew provided blankets, hot soup, and medical attention. There was no boasting, no demands for reward. There was just quiet competence. Naruto sat on the forecastle, slurping a cup of instant ramen with gusto. The sage mode had faded from his eyes, leaving them a warm, brilliant blue once more. He laughed at a joke Jiro made. The sound easy and unburdened. He was no longer the terrifying whirlwind of power, he was just a young man enjoying a meal. Vivi, now cleaned up and wearing borrowed clothes, approached him cautiously. She had observed him for an hour, watched him interact with his small crew, with the children he'd rescued. He'd taught one of them a simple string game, his large, calloused hands moving with surprising delicacy. "Captain Uzumaki," she said, her voice more formal than she intended. He looked up from his ramen, a noodle dangling from his lip. He slurped it up noisily before grinning. "Just Naruto is fine. And you're Miss Wednesday, right? Glad to see you're looking better. The soup's not bad, is it? Ken's getting better at not burning the water." From the mast, a voice yelled down. "I heard that, Captain." Vivi couldn't help a small smile. The easy camaraderie was infectious. The soup is excellent, Captain. Naruto, I wish to thank you. On behalf of all of us. Don't thank me, he said. Setting the empty cup aside, he looked out at the horizon, his expression turning serious. No one should ever be in chains. It's that simple. We just tipped the scales back to how they should be. He turned his gaze on her, and his eyes were so perceptive it felt like he was looking straight through her disguise, into the heart of her worries. But you're not just a slave, are you? You carry yourself differently. You've got the eyes of someone with a heavy burden. Vivi's breath caught in her throat. Her carefully constructed facade felt tissue thin under his gaze. This was the moment. He was her last, desperate hope. You are correct, she said, her voice dropping, taking on the regal cadence she had suppressed for so long. She straightened her back, and though she wore simple sailor's clothes, the bearing of a princess returned to her. My name is Nefertari Vivi, and I am the crown princess of the Alabasta Kingdom. Jiro, who had been coiling a rope nearby, stopped. Ken peered down from the mast, his interest piqued. Naruto's expression didn't change. He just nodded, as if confirming something he already suspected. A princess. That's a heavy burden, all right. What's a princess doing on a slaver ship in the middle of nowhere? Vivi's composure broke, her voice thick with desperation and grief. My country is dying, Naruto. It's being torn apart by a civil war. A rebellion fueled by lies and desperation. We've been in a drought for 3 years. People are starving, fighting over scraps, while the capital, Alubarna, is the only place where it rains. The people think my father, the king, is stealing the rain from them. They think he's a tyrant. But he's not, Naruto stated. It wasn't a question. No, Vivi cried, tears welling in her eyes. He loves his people more than anything. The drought, the rebellion, it's all being orchestrated. By one man, a warlord of the sea, sanctioned by the world government. His name is Crocodile. At the mention of the warlord, Jiro let out a low whistle. Crocodile. Captain, that's bad business. The man is a king in the shadows. He runs Baroque Works, a billion-dollar criminal empire. He's not someone you cross lightly. Vivi looked at Naruto, her eyes pleading. He is the one funding the slave trades. I let myself be captured to prove it. He is a hero in the public eye, the man who hunts pirates, but behind the scenes. He is a monster who is strangling my home. The Navy won't help. The world government sanctions him. We are alone. Millions of people will die, and my father will be branded a traitor to his own kingdom. She took a shaky breath, then bowed low, a gesture of ultimate supplication. Naruto Uzumaki, I have seen your power. But more than that, I have seen your heart. You speak of freedom. My people have none. I am begging you, please, lend me your strength. Help me save my kingdom. The deck was silent, save for the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. The setting sun painted the clouds in hues of orange and purple, casting a long shadow from Naruto's seated form. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze distant. Vivi remained bowed, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. Rejection meant the end of Alabasta. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but firm. I'm on a journey. I'm looking for something my clan left behind. The one freedom. A way to break all the chains, for good. The celestial mandate, the corrupt nobles, the warlords who act like kings, they're all just links in the same chain. They wrap it around the world and call it order. He stood up and walked over to her. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, prompting her to rise. He looked her right in the eye, and the warmth in his was overwhelming. Your crocodile, he's just one of those links. And you know what you do with chains. Vivi looked at him, hope blossoming so fiercely it almost hurt. Naruto grinned, that wild, brilliant, storm-bringing grin. You break them. He clapped his hands together once. The sound sharp and final. All right, Jiro, set a course for the Sandy Kingdom. Looks like we're making a little detour. Jiro's grizzled face split into a wide smile. Captain, a date with a desert and a warlord. Sounds like a party. Vivi stared at Naruto, tears of relief now streaming down her face. He hadn't just agreed. He had taken her entire world-ending problem and treated it like a simple, necessary step on his own path. In his eyes, the liberation of her kingdom wasn't a distraction, it was the entire point. In that moment, She saw him not as a pirate, not as a captain, but as a force of nature, a maelstrom of chaotic good that might just be powerful enough to wash the whole rotten world clean. Far away, in a place that knew no storms, the world was gold. The holy city of Marihoa sat atop the Red Line, a citadel of impossible architecture and serene tyranny. Here, the grass was perfectly manicured, the air was still and filtered, and the sky was an empty, placid blue. It was a city devoid of chaos, of passion, of freedom. It was a monument to absolute order. In the heart of the Pangaea castle, within the Chamber of Thrones, 5 old men sat before a single, empty seat of immense size. They were the 5 elders, the highest authority of the world government. But they were not the true power. A presence entered the room. It did not walk, it simply was. A man with hair the color of bleached bone and eyes that held the cold, ancient light of distant stars. He wore simple white robes, yet his presence dwarfed the opulent room. This was the sovereign, the god-king of the celestial mandate, a being known to the world only in whispers. A being who, centuries ago, had consumed a fruit that gave him dominion over the very concept of reality and order. A being who called himself Izanagi. Report, he said, his voice was not sound, but a thought impressed upon their minds. One of the elders, the one with the long white beard and a sword across his lap, bowed his head. Sovereign, there has been a disturbance in the Grand Charybdis. The slave vessel Gilded Cage has been neutralized. The cargo, freed. Izanagi's expression did not change. He was a statue of placid divinity. A minor loss. The dealings of the Don Quixote family are their own concern. The perpetrator was a single ship, the elder continued, his voice tight. The Rasengan, captained by a boy named Naruto Uzumaki. At the name, a flicker of something ancient and cold stirred in Izanagi's stellar eyes. Uzumaki, the clan of discord, the architects of chaos. We had thought them extinguished. He wields strange abilities. Power over wind, the ability to create facsimiles of himself. He subdued 100 armed men without a single casualty among his crew or the slaves, the elder finished. Izanagi was silent for a moment. He could feel it, a tiny, insignificant thread in the perfect tapestry of his world, vibrating with the wrong frequency. A note of discord in the grand symphony of order. It was the legacy of Uzu, the will of a clan that believed freedom was the natural state of man, a philosophy he had spent millennia erasing. This is not a pirate, Izanagi thought. Pirates are agents of greed. They are a predictable part of the system. This is an idea, an infection, and infections must be sterilized before they can spread. He turned his gaze to a far corner of the room, where a man in a pristine white vice admiral's uniform stood at perfect attention. The man was young, with sharp features and dark, focused eyes that missed nothing. A brilliant white marine coat was draped over his shoulders. Vice Admiral Kato, the sovereign's voice resonated in the chamber. Sovereign, Kato replied, his voice crisp and unwavering. He snapped a salute. The pirate known as Naruto Uzumaki. He is a disruption to the peace. A threat to the stability we have so carefully built. You will take your fleet. You will find him. And you will erase him. Kato's face was a mask of dutiful resolve. He was a prodigy, the wielder of the glimmer fruit, a man who could become and command light itself. He was a weapon of absolute justice. The perfect instrument of the world government's will. By your will, sovereign, Kato said, his voice ringing with conviction. I will extinguish this threat to our perfect order. I will bring justice to the maelstrom of Uzu. He saluted once more, turned with military precision, and strode from the room, a righteous blade being dispatched to excise a festering sore. On his throne of air, Izanagi watched him go. He felt the threads of fate, of order, converging on a remote desert kingdom. The boy, Uzumaki, was a ripple of chaos. And he had just sent a tidal wave of order to flatten it. The outcome was, as all things were, already decided. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Sands of Alabasta. The heat was a physical presence. It shimmered above the pale sand, distorting the horizon into a wavering, drunken line. The air, stripped of all moisture, was sharp in the lungs, tasting of dust and baked earth. Alabasta was a kingdom dying of thirst, and the port town of Nanohana was its open wound. The Rasengan, a vessel born of storms and sea spray, looked alien and out of place docked in the silt-choked harbor. The vibrant crimson of its sail was an affront to the bleached, sun-faded palette of the city. Buildings of sandstone and clay, once proud and ornate, were crumbling, their edges softened by the ceaseless wind. The faces of the people were etched with the same weary erosion. They moved with a listless shuffle, their eyes downcast, conserving what little energy they had. Naruto stood on the gangplank, his black coat a stark slash against the white-hot glare of the sun. He had shed the orange interior lining, leaving it a simple, practical black. The oppressive heat didn't seem to touch him, but his sage's senses drank in the misery of the place. It was a low, constant hum of despair, a chorus of thirsty cells and broken spirits. Vivi stood beside him, her princess-straight posture now a fragile shield against the heartbreaking reality of her home. She had changed into loose-fitting desert robes, a hood drawn up to protect her from the sun and prying eyes. "This is Nanohana," she said, her voice barely a whisper. It used to be the most vibrant trading hub on the island. They called it the Perfumed City because of the spice markets. Now, the only smell was dust. "The rebel army is gathering near here," she continued, pointing towards the vast, empty desert beyond the town. "Their leader, his name is Koza. He believes my father betrayed him. Betrayed everyone." Naruto's gaze swept over the town, absorbing every detail. The long, silent lines at the town's only well. The skeletal remains of pack animals. The suspicious, fearful glances they received from the locals. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say, "It will be okay." He turned to Vivi, his blue eyes clear and focused. "Okay," he said, the single word a promise of action. "We can't fix this by punching a drought. This isn't a fistfight, it's a war of belief. And right now, the rebels believe the wrong thing. We need to change their minds." He looked at Jiro and Ken, who had followed them onto the dock. "Jiro, you and Ken stay with the ship. Keep a low profile, but be ready to move fast. This place feels like a tinderbox. One wrong spark, and the whole thing goes up." Jiro nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of the large blade he wore at his hip. "You just give the word, Captain." Naruto turned back to the sprawling desert. "Vivi, you and I have work to do." He brought his hands together in a familiar cross seal. Shadow clone jutsu. In a series of smokeless puffs, 100 Narutos appeared on the dock. The sudden crowd drew gasps from the few onlookers, who stumbled back in fear. The clones didn't speak. They stood in perfect, disciplined ranks, their collective gaze fixed on the original. It was unnerving, an army born from a single man. "All right, listen up," Naruto commanded, his voice sharp. The clones all snapped to attention. "You have your orders. Spread out. I want eyes and ears everywhere. I want to know everything. The rebels' numbers, their supplies, their morale. I want to know every move Baroque Works is making on this island. I want to know where Crocodile is, what he eats for breakfast, and how he's pulling this off. Be smart. Be quiet. Do not engage unless you have to. Go." Without a word, the army of clones dissolved. Some flickered out of sight, moving with shinobi speed. Others simply walked into the crowds, their forms subtly shifting, their presence becoming less obtrusive as they melted into the fabric of the dying city and the vast desert beyond. Vivi stared, dumbfounded. In the span of 30 seconds, he had deployed a spy network that would take a conventional army months to establish. "A whirlwind," she murmured, remembering her own words. "You really are. A maelstrom is just a whirlwind with a purpose," he corrected, a faint smile touching his lips. He pulled up his own hood. "Come on. You're the heart of this country, Vivi. I'm just the muscle. You need to lead me to its soul." He nodded toward the town. "Let's start by finding your friend, Koza." Their headquarters was the dusty, forgotten back room of a TAV. Urn whose owner had been bought with a week's worth of clean water and the promise of more. It was small, cramped, and smelled of stale ale and regret. A map of Alabasta, old and cracked, was spread across a rickety table. For hours, it was the nerve center of Naruto's one-man intelligence agency. A clone would flicker into existence in the corner of the room, dust-covered and grim-faced. The main rebel force numbers over 1 million. Mostly civilians, farmers, merchants. They're armed with little more than farm tools and old hunting rifles. Their morale is high, but their supplies are dangerously low. They plan to march on the capital, Alubarna, in 2 days. The clone would report, then vanish in a puff of smoke. Naruto would absorb the information, his eyes closed, and make a mark on the map. Another clone appeared. Baroque Works agents confirmed, operating under the code names Mr. 1, Miss Doublefinger, and others. They're embedded with the rebels, posing as advisors, constantly King the flames of hatred against the king. Puff. Another. I made it to Alubarna. The royal palace is surrounded by the king's guard, but the city is tense. There are whispers of a substance called dance powder being found in the port. It's a forbidden chemical that induces rain, but it drains all moisture from the surrounding lands for miles. The rebels believe the king is using it to keep capital green while the rest of the country dies. Puff. Vivi listened, her hands clenched into fists. Dance powder. It's a lie. My father would rather die than use that cursed substance. It's crocodile, planting it, framing him. I know, Naruto said calmly, his focus absolute. He was a general processing battlefield reports, his mind a steel trap. He wasn't swayed by emotion, only by fact. A new clone appeared, its form shimmering with heat exhaustion. Rain Base. It's a new city, built around a massive casino called Rain Dinners. It's a disgusting oasis of wealth in the middle of the desert. The place is crawling with Baroque Works agents. The owner of the casino is a man no one ever sees. They just call him Mr. 0 feet. Puff. That's him, Vivi spat, her voice laced with venom. Crocodile. Naruto tapped the location of Rainbase on the map, then drew a line from it to the rebel encampment. He's running the whole war from a gambling den. Classy. He looked at Vivi, his expression serious. Your friend, Koza. He's leading 1,000,000 desperate people to their deaths. They'll crash against the royal guard, and Crocodile will swoop in to restore order, making himself the hero. We have to stop that march. But how? Vivi asked, her voice cracking. Koza won't listen to me. To him, I'm part of the family that betrayed him. We were friends as children. He founded this oasis, Yuba, with his own hands. Now it's being swallowed by the sand. His heart is buried in that sand, filled with nothing but rage. Then we have to give him a reason to listen, Naruto said. He looked at the last clone. One that had been standing silently in the corner, holding a small, rolled-up scroll. What did you find? The clone stepped forward. I tailed a Baroque Works officer agent leaving the rebel camp. He was careless. This was his communication with a superior. He handed the scroll to the real Naruto and dissipated. Naruto unrolled it. It was an order, written in a precise, cold hand. The rebellion is reaching critical mass. Ensure Koza initiates the march on schedule. Any hesitation is to be met with extreme prejudice. The clash at Alubarna is vital for the Utopia plan. Hail Baroque Works. Utopia. Vivi whispered in horror. The death of millions is what he calls Utopia. Naruto rolled the scroll back up and tucked it into his coat. It's also our proof. He met her gaze, his own filled with a hard resolve. You know him. You know his heart. You have to be the one to reach him. I'll be there to make sure you get the chance. The rebel camp was a sprawling sea. Tie of tense and desperation under the unforgiving eye of the sun. 1,000,000 voices murmured, a sound like the wind blowing through a graveyard. When Vivi, her hood thrown back to reveal her face, walked into the camp with Naruto. A wave of silence and suspicion followed them. Whispers turned to angry shouts. The princess. What is she doing here? Traitor. Has she come to mock us? Armed men quickly surrounded them. Their makeshift weapons held ready. Naruto stood perfectly still, his hands in his pockets, his presence a calm island in a sea of hostility. He was watching, waiting. A path cleared, and a man strode through the crowd. He was tall and lean, his face half covered by goggles, his skin burned dark by the sun. His eyes, when they landed on Vivi, were filled with a pain so deep it had curdled into pure, unyielding fury. This was Koza. Vivi, he said, his voice raw. You have nerve, showing your face here. Koza, please, you have to listen to me, Vivi began, taking a step forward. You are all being deceived. The king is not your enemy. Not our enemy. Koza laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Tell that to the children who drink sand. Tell that to the old men who die of thirst. We saw the dance powder ships at the capital. We know the truth. It's a lie. A trap set by Crocodile. Crocodile is a warlord, a hero of the people who hunts pirates. Koza roared, his voice booming across the tense crowd. The only villain I see is the king who sits in his palace, drinking water while his people turn to dust. He drew a long, curved sword. Leave now, Vivi. For the sake of the friendship we once had, I will let you walk away. But if you stand with the royal family, you are my enemy. The crowd roared in agreement. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons. Naruto sighed softly. You know, for a guy leading a revolution, you're not very good at gathering intelligence. Koza's furious gaze snapped to him. And who are you? Her pirate bodyguard. Something like that, Naruto said, taking a step to stand beside Vivi. Look, I get it. You're angry. You're hurt. You've got every right to be. But you're pointing your anger at the wrong person. You're the fist, but someone else is the brain. And they're about to have you punch a brick wall. He pulled the scroll from his coat and tossed it at Koza's feet. Read it. An agent of your hero. Crocodile dropped it. It's your marching orders. Koza stared at the scroll, then back at Naruto, his face a mask of suspicion. One of the men beside him, a portly fellow with a cruel smile Koza hadn't noticed before, spoke up. Don't listen to him, Chief. It's a trick, a pirate's lie. Shut up, Naruto said without looking at the man. His sage mode was active, and he could feel the man's life force. It was slick and deceitful. A stark contrast to the raw, honest rage of the rebels around him. Let him read it. Hesitantly, Koza knelt and picked up the scroll. As he read, his face shifted from anger to confusion, then to dawning horror. The words on the page were a cold, hard dose of a truth he didn't want to believe. Ensure Koza initiates the march, vital for the Utopia plan. He was a pawn. His righteous anger, his people's suffering, it was all just a resource being spent for someone else's gain. The portly Baroque works agent saw his opening closing. He's a fool. Kill them, he shrieked, drawing a pistol. He never fired it. There was a flicker of orange, and Naruto was suddenly in front of him, hand clasped around the agent's wrist. I said, shut up. With a quiet crack, he twisted the man's wrist. The gun clattered to the sand. Before anyone else could react, a dozen of Naruto's clones materialized from the crowd, silently and efficiently subduing the other Baroque works age. NTS that Vivi's trained I now easily identified. It was over in 5 seconds. Koza stared at the defeated agents, then at the scroll in his trembling hand, and finally at Vivi, whose eyes were filled with tears. The fury in his expression crumbled, replaced by a devastating wave of shame and grief. Vivi, what have I done? It's not too late, Koza, she said, her voice gentle. We can still fix this. But we have to stop Crocodile. Quote, Naruto clapped his hands, getting everyone's attention. Good. Now that we're all on the same page, here's the plan. Koza, you and your army will march on Alubarna. A shocked silence fell over the camp. What? Koza and Vivi said in unison. Naruto grinned. But you're not going to fight. You're going to march there and, with the king's guard, you're going to protect the capital from Crocodile's forces. Show the world that Alabasta is united. Meanwhile, he jabbed a thumb towards the direction of Rainbase. I'm going to go have a word with the man who runs the casino. Rainbase was an insult to the desert. A city of gaudy gold and flashing lights, powered by a gluttonous consumption of resources while the rest of the country withered. At its heart was the 7-star hotel and casino. Rain dinners. Naruto walked through the main entrance alone. The opulence was nauseating. Waterfalls cascaded down marble walls into crystal pools. Men in fine suits and women in glittering dresses laughed as they threw away fortunes, their joy a stark contrast to the suffering just beyond the city's walls. He ignored them all, his senses scanning, piercing through the floors and walls. He felt him, a powerful, predatory presence, cold and dry as the desert night. Top floor, private lounge. He didn't take the elevator. He simply walked to a wall, placed his hand on it, and channeled a gentle pulse of wind chakra. The marble and plaster crumbled to dust, creating a man-sized hole. He stepped through, into a service corridor, and began to ascend, his movements silent and fluid. A ghost in the machine. He emerged on the top floor into a lavish suite. A man stood with his back to him, looking out a massive window at the setting sun. He was tall and imposing, wearing a luxurious fur coat over a bare, scarred chest. A huge golden hook took the place of his left hand. "To break into my private suite, you are either very brave or very foolish, boy," the man said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He turned, revealing a cruel, stitched face and dead, reptilian eyes. "This was Sir Crocodile. Given that you've come alone, I'm leaning towards foolish." "Depends on your perspective," Naruto said, his hands in his pockets. "From where I'm standing, building a palace of stolen water in the middle of a desert you created seems pretty foolish." Crocodile. E's lips peeled back in a semblance of a smile. "So the little princess found herself a dog. I'm impressed. What did she offer you?" "Treasure. Fame. She offered me a problem to solve," Naruto replied, his easygoing demeanor hardening. "You see, I'm on a journey to promote a very simple idea, freedom. And you, with your secret society and your manufactured wars, are bad for business." Crocodile laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Freedom. You speak like a child. People don't want freedom. It's a burden. It leads to chaos, to weakness. What people truly crave is stability. An ordered world, a strong hand to guide them. I offer them that. I am a savior, not a villain." "You're a parasite," Naruto shot back. "You drain the life from this country and call it salvation. The only thing you're saving is your own ambition. Ambition is what drives the world, boy," Crocodile sneered. He began to walk towards Naruto, his right hand raised. "And my ambition is about to be realized. Alabasta will be mine, a stepping stone to an ancient weapon that will allow me to topple even the world government. You are nothing but a minor, irritating delay." The floor around Crocodile began to shift, the shish carpet and marble turning into cascading waves of sand. "I am a warlord of the sea. My bounty is over 80 million berries. I have the power of the sand fruit. What, pray tell, are you?" Naruto grinned, a flash of feral light in his eyes. He slowly pulled his hands from his pockets. "Me, I'm the maelstrom." The fight began instantly. Crocodile lunged, his body dissolving into a torrent of sand that shot across the room. Naruto sidestepped, the sandstorm roaring past him and blasting a hole through the far wall. The warlord reformed behind him, his golden hook glinting. Too slow. He swung the hook. Naruto ducked under it, the wind of its passage ruffling his hair. He spun, driving a powerful kick into Crocodile's midsection. His foot went straight through him. Crocodile's torso was now just a swirling column of sand. "Logia type," Naruto muttered, leaping back. "Annoying, annoying." Crocodile chuckled, his form solidifying again. "Boy, it's invincible." He slammed his hand on the floor. Desert Spada. A blade of hardened, compacted sand erupted from the ground, shooting towards Naruto. Naruto deflected it with a blast of wind from his palm, the two forces meeting with a grinding shriek. The battle was a blur of motion. Naruto was faster, more agile, but every attack was useless. Punches, kicks, even a Rasengan, they all passed through Crocodile's sandy form, doing no damage. In return, Crocodile's attacks were relentless. He could create quicksand pits, launch blades of sand, or simply try to desiccate Naruto with a touch of his right hand, a terrifying power that could drain all moisture from a living being. Naruto was on the defensive, his coat now torn, a shallow cut bleeding on his cheek. He was using his sage mode to predict Crocodile's attacks, but he couldn't land a single blow. "Is this all the maelstrom has?" Crocodile taunted, standing amidst a swirling vortex of his own making. "A little breeze. I am the desert itself. I am an unkillable god in this land." Naruto landed on a shattered piece of furniture, breathing a little heavily. He looked at the cut on his cheek, then at the blood on his glove. He looked at Crocodile, the arrogant warlord who thought himself untouchable. A slow grin spread across his face. "God," Naruto said, "that's funny. I've met a few. You're not even close." He clenched his bloody fist. "You say you're the desert. But even the desert bleeds when it rains." Before Crocodile could process the words, Naruto charged again. This time, he didn't aim for the center of mass. He swung his bloodied fist in a wide arc. Crocodile, arrogant and dismissive, let the attack come, expecting it to pass through him harmlessly. It didn't. Naruto's fist, coated in a thin layer of his own blood, connected with Crocodile's jaw with a sickening crunch. The warlord's eyes went wide with shock and pain as he was sent flying across the room, crashing into a wall. He touched his jaw, feeling the solid bone, the throbbing ache. He looked at his fingers. They were wet. Blood, he whispered in disbelief. Water. The weakness. Took you long enough to figure it out, Naruto said, wiping a smear of blood across his other hand. Now, let's try this again. The fight was no longer one-sided. It was a brutal, close-quarters brawl. Naruto, now able to land his blows, pressed his advantage relentlessly. But Crocodile was a veteran, a master of dirty fighting. As Naruto moved in for a final blow, Crocodile revealed the hidden compartment in his golden hook. A smaller, venomous hook shot out, laced with a potent scorpion poison. It grazed Naruto's side, a searing line of fire. Naruto grunted, stumbling back, a hand pressed to his side. The world wavered for a second. The poison was fast, potent. It is over, Crocodile rasped, getting to his feet. That poison can kill an elephant in 60 seconds. You were already dead. It was at that moment that the entire building shook. A thunderous explosion echoed from the distance, followed by the distant sound of cannon fire. Through the holes in the wall, they could see the harbor. A fleet of pristine white marine ships had arrived, their cannons blazing, not at the city, but at the empty docks where the Rasengan had been. On the bridge of the lead vessel, Vice Admiral Kato stood, his expression like stone. Report, he said to a subordinate. Sir, the pirate ship Rasengan has already fled. But we have confirmation. The pirate, Naruto Uzumaki, has been located. He's in the Rain Dinner's casino, confronting the warlord Crocodile. Kato's eyes narrowed. My orders are to eliminate Uzumaki. The warlord is an ally of the government. Ignore the casino. All ships, focus fire on any and all pirate associates in the city. Justice must be swift. Down below, chaos erupted. Marine cannonballs rained down on the outskirts of Rainbase. Civilians screamed and fled. Naruto saw it all. He saw the cold, indiscriminate fire of the Navy. He saw a mother and child, about to be crushed by a falling piece of a building. He saw Crocodile, laughing. Your friends have arrived to watch you die. The poison was spreading. Naruto's vision was tunneling. But in that moment, his anger and his resolve burned away the pain. He made a hand seal. A single shadow clone appeared, flickered across the rooftops, and pushed the mother and child out of the way of the debris, taking the hit and disappearing in a puff of smoke. Up on the marine flagship, Kato witnessed this through his spyglass. He saw the warlord Crocodile do nothing. He saw the pirate Naruto Uzumaki, a man he was sent to kill, save innocent lives while poisoned and exhausted. A hairline crack appeared in the perfect, unyielding edifice of his justice. I'm not dying here, Naruto snarled, his eyes blazing with the orange of Sage Mode, now mixed with the feral red of Kurama's chakra leaking out. The power was immense, raw, and furious. He started gathering it, forcing the poison back, channeling every last ounce of his strength. A whirlwind of chakra, so intense it was visible, began to form in his hand. It shrieked, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of the air itself. Rasenshuriken. It wasn't a sphere. It was a colossal, four-pointed shuriken of pure, howling wind energy. It dwarfed him, its sound blotting out the cannons, the screams, everything. Crocodile's eyes were wide with terror. He had never seen power like this. What is that? Salvation. Naruto roared. He didn't throw it at Crocodile. He didn't throw it at the Navy. He aimed it down, at the very foundation of the casino. At the massive, secret underground aquifer Crocodile had been hoarding. He slammed the Rasenshuriken into the ground. The impact was not an explosion. It was an implosion. For a second, all sound ceased. Then, the ground ruptured. A geyser of pure, clean water, hundreds of feet wide, erupted from beneath Rainbase with the force of a volcano. It blasted the casino from its foundations, sending Crocodile screaming into the sky. It washed over the city, dousing the fires. It surged towards the harbor, creating a massive wave that tossed the Navy fleet around like bath toys. It was a flash flood. An act of destruction and creation in one. In the ensuing chaos, a single, sleek ship with a crimson sail darted out of a hidden cove. A rope was thrown, and a weakened, bleeding Naruto was hauled aboard. From the deck of his listing ship, Kato watched the Rasengan disappear into the spray. He saw the water, the life-giving water, already beginning to spread across the parched desert sands. He had his orders, but what he had seen, it wasn't justice. Later, aboard the Rasengan, Naruto lay recovering, the last of the poison being forced from his system by his formidable healing factor. Vivi sat by his side, tending to his wound. "You saved them," she said softly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You saved everyone. Just broke another chain," he mumbled, his eyes closed. He had defeated a warlord, humbled the navy, and brought rain to a dying land. To him, it was just another day at work. Vivi looked out at the horizon, where the red soil of Alabasta was already beginning to darken with moisture. Her kingdom was safe, for now, but she knew this was only the beginning. Crocodile was just one man. The system that created him, the world government, the sovereign, they were still out there. She looked back at the sleeping face of the man who had brought a storm to her desert. "You're going to keep fighting, aren't you?" she whispered. "You're going to challenge the whole world." He didn't answer, but she knew. "You'll need help," she said, her voice firming with new resolve. "You're a maelstrom, Naruto, but even a storm needs a direction. You need someone to navigate the political currents you leave in your wake. You'll need a diplomat." She placed her hand over his. "Alabasta is my home, but the world is my responsibility now. Take me with you." On his flagship, Vice Admiral Kato finished his report. He wrote the truth, every detail. He described Crocodile's treachery, the Utopia plan, and Naruto Uzumaki's actions in saving the kingdom. He sealed the document and sent it with his fastest messenger bird to the Central Command. Days later, in a sterile office in Marihoa, a high-ranking official read the report. He read it twice. Then, he lit a match and dropped it into a heavy brass ashtray. Watching the truth turn to black ash, he picked up a fresh sheet of paper and began to write the official account. Vice Admiral Kato, in a heroic battle, engaged the notorious pirate Naruto Uzumaki, who, in a desperate and cowardly act, destroyed the city of Rainbase and grievously wounded the warlord Sir Crocodile. The pirate remains at large. The pursuit is to continue with extreme prejudice. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage. The Rasengan limped across a sea as placid as glass, a wounded predator seeking a place to heal. The battle for Alabasta had been won, but the victory was etched into the very bones of the ship. A long, ugly scar ran along the starboard hull where a marine cannonball had struck a glancing blow. The main mast, a marvel of chakra wood, was splintered near its peak from the shockwave of Naruto's own Rasenshuriken. Jiro, cursing under his breath, had jury-rigged a support structure that looked more like a prayer than a proper repair. Naruto sat cross-legged on the deck, shirtless, the morning sun warming his back. The venomous gash on his side, which would have killed a normal man in a minute, was now a puckered, angry red scar that his healing factor was slowly smoothing into pale skin. He wasn't resting. A dozen shadow clones were scattered across the ship, scrubbing decks, mending sails, and assisting Jiro with the delicate Fuinjutsu-based repairs the ship's unique construction required. The real Naruto was meditating, his senses extended, feeling the rhythm of his small but growing crew. Vivi stood at the port railing. A nautical chart spread before her, held down by polished stones. She was no longer just a passenger. In the days since they'd fled Alabasta, she had become the ship's navigator and political counsel. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of the world's currents, both oceanic and political, gleaned from years of royal education. "The damage is too severe for a common port," she announced, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need specialized materials for the repairs, and our sea charts for the new world are woefully out of date. To continue on your quest, we need a safe harbor with advanced resources." Naruto opened one eye. "You have a place in mind, I take it." "I do," she said, tapping a blank space on the chart. "It is not on any standard map. Most believe it to be a myth. A sky isle, floating 10,000 feet above the sea. The technocracy of Argent." Ken, polishing his spyglass on the forecastle, scoffed. "A floating island, princess, with all due respect, that sounds like a fairy tale." "It is very real," Vivi insisted. "Argent is a nation of geniuses, centuries ahead of the rest of the world in science and engineering. They maintain strict neutrality, trading air technology with no one and allowing few visitors. But the royal family of Alabasta has maintained a formal, if distant, diplomatic tie for generations. They are our best hope for repairs and, more importantly, for celestial navigation charts that are impossible to find elsewhere. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, stretching with a groan. An invisible, floating island of geniuses. Sounds interesting. He walked over to her, peering at the blank spot on the map. How do we get there? Vivi hesitated. That is the difficult part. Argent does not have a port. It is said the only way to it is to ride the breath of the world. Naruto grinned, a slow, wolfish thing. The breath of the world, huh? I know a thing or two about that. He looked up at the clear blue sky. Jiro, get ready to handle a serious updraft. Ken, secure everything that isn't nailed down. Vivi, you might want to hold on to something. He walked to the center of the ship, planted his feet, and took a deep breath. He held out his hands, palms facing the sea. The air around the Rasengan grew heavy, the placid water beginning to ripple. A low hum vibrated through the deck as he gathered the natural energy around him. Sage mode blooming in his eyes. He wasn't just controlling the wind, he was commanding it. With a sharp exhale, he thrust his hands downward. An invisible column of air, a controlled cyclone, erupted beneath the ship. The Rasengan groaned, then surged upwards, water cascading from its hull in a torrential downpour. It rose from the sea like a breaching leviathan, ascending into the sky on a pillar of roaring wind. Vivi clung to the railing, her heart in her throat, a laugh of pure, terrified exhilaration escaping her lips. This man didn't just sail the seas. He bent the world to his will. Hours later, they broke through a thick layer of clouds into an ocean of white, fluffy cumulus. And there, floating in the endless blue of the upper atmosphere, was Argent. It was breathtaking and unsettling. It was an island of gleaming silver and white, a collection of impossibly tall, slender spires connected by graceful, arching bridges. There were no trees, no soil, no grass. The entire city was built on a foundation of interlocking metallic plates that hummed with a low, resonant energy. Small, silent crafts, skiffs, glided through the air between the towers on invisible currents. The place was pristine, silent, and cold. A gilded cage. As they approached, one of the skiffs detached from a spire and moved to intercept them. It was sleek and unmanned. A voice, calm and devoid of emotion, emanated from it. Unidentified vessel, you have entered Argent sovereign airspace. State your designation and purpose. Deviate from your current trajectory and you will be met with terminal force. Vivi stepped forward, her voice clear and regal. This is the vessel Rasengan, carrying Princess Nefertari Vivi of the Alabasta Kingdom. We request permission to dock under the ancient Accord of Scholars and seek aid for repairs. There was a pause. The skiff's dispassionate hum continued. Verifying. Princess Nefertari Vivi. Status. Verified. Accord of Scholars. Status. Verified. You are cleared for approach to docking spire GAMMA7. A protocol guide will meet you. Welcome to Argent. The welcome felt as warm as a surgical instrument. Their guide was a man named Executor Valerius. He was tall and thin, dressed in a form-fitting silver uniform, his expression a carefully constructed mask of neutral politeness. He led them from the docking spire into the city proper, his feet making no sound on the polished metal walkways. Your vessel's damage is extensive, Valerius noted, his eyes flicking over the Rasengan with analytical disdain. Our fabricators can replicate the required materials. Though the integration of chakra wood is a theoretical challenge we will enjoy. The process will require 3 cycles. 3 days. Naruto asked. 3 full rotations of the city's energy core, Valerius corrected. Your concept of a day is based on the chaotic rotation of the world below. Here, we operate on a more logical timescale. He led them into a vast, white chamber where they were met by a council of elders. All dressed in the same silver uniforms. At their head was a man with silver hair and a weary, intelligent face, Archon Theron, the elected leader of Argent and, as they would soon learn, its princess's father, Princess Vivi, the Archon said with a slight, formal bow. It has been many years since Alabasta has called upon our accord. We will Of course, honor it. Your ship will be repaired. His gaze then shifted to Naruto, and his eyes narrowed slightly. But your companion is a variable we had not anticipated. Naruto Uzumaki, your name has been flagged by the Mandate Information Network. You are classified as a Class A threat. A purveyor of chaos. I prefer. Agent of change, Naruto said with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Chow. S is just what order calls everything it doesn't control. Archon Theron did not smile back. A poetic, if illogical, sentiment. Argent has survived for centuries by remaining outside the world's chaos. Your presence here puts our neutrality at risk. While we repair your ship, you and your crew will be confined to this spire. For your safety, and for ours. Before Naruto could protest, another figure entered the chamber. She moved with the same silent grace as the others, her posture rigid and perfect. She had long, silver hair braided in an intricate, severe style, and eyes the color of mercury. Her face was a model of aristocratic beauty, but her expression was as neutral and detached as everyone else's. Yet, beneath the placid surface, Naruto's sage senses felt a flicker of something else. A brilliant, restless mind, buzzing like a trapped hornet. Father, she said, her voice a soft, precise monotone. The delegation from the Celestial Mandate has arrived ahead of schedule. Lord Cassian is requesting an audience. Of course, the Archon said. He turned to Naruto's group. This is my daughter, Princess Serafina. She will see to your accommodations. He then departed with the other elders, leaving Naruto, Vivi, and Ken alone with the silver-haired princess. Serafina's mercury eyes swept over them, her gaze analytical. She lingered on Naruto for a fraction of a second longer than the others. Your intrusion is statistically problematic, she stated, her tone flat. My betrothal ceremony is in 3 cycles. The presence of a wanted pirate complicates the security algorithms. Vivi's eyes widened. Betrothal, to whom? Lord Cassian of the Celestial Mandate, Serafina replied, as if reciting a data point. The Alliance will formally codify Argent's non-aggression pact, ensuring our continued isolation and access to off-world resources controlled by the Mandate. It is the most logical course of action for our people's survival. There was not a hint of joy in her voice. Or sadness. There was nothing. She was a schematic, a blueprint. But Naruto saw the flicker again, the spark of rebellion buried deep in her eyes. This wasn't a union, it was a sentence. Later that evening, in their assigned quarters, a minimalist suite of white and silver, the crew debated. We can't interfere, Vivi argued, pacing the room. Argent is a sovereign power. Forcing the issue could start a war. Strategically, it's a disaster. We'd be making an enemy of one of the few powerful nations not already aligned against us. So we just leave her here. Ken countered, sharpening a kunai. To be married off to some government slug. That doesn't feel right, princess. It's not about what feels right, it's about what's smart. Vivi shot back, her diplomatic instincts warring with her conscience. Naruto remained silent, leaning against a wall, his arms crossed. He was listening, observing. He understood Vivi's logic, but his own philosophy was simpler. A cage is a cage, no matter how gilded. A soft chime sounded at their door. Naruto opened it to find Princess Serafina standing there alone, her face for the first time showing a crack in its perfect, neutral facade. It was urgency. May I enter? She asked, her voice a low whisper. She slipped inside, and the door slid silently shut behind her. Your debate is inefficient, she said, her gaze darting between them. You are arguing morality versus strategy. The two are not mutually exclusive. She looked directly at Naruto. Captain Uzumaki, you dismantled Crocodile's entire operation in Alabasta. An operation with a 97.4% success probability. You did not accomplish this with brute force alone. You used strategic infiltration and destabilization. You are a chaotic variable, but you are not an illogical one. She unrolled a holographic schematic, projecting it into the center of the room. It was a breathtakingly detailed 3D model of the city's central and most heavily fortified spire. This is the Aegis Spire, she explained, her voice quickening. Alive with an energy she had suppressed before. It is where the conjunction ceremony will take place. It is designed to be the most secure structure on Argent. Its defenses are not based on guards, but on logic. Predictive energy barriers, quantum tunneling sensors, and automated logic sentinels that adapt to threats in real time. It is, by all calculations, impenetrable. And you want us to penetrate it? Naruto finished, a slow smile spreading across his face. Serafina's mercury eyes locked with his, and for the first time, they shone with fierce, brilliant life. I do. I have spent my life studying strategy, war games, political theory, logistical modeling. I have run 10,000 simulations for planetary defense. My mind is the sharpest weapon this nation has. And my father uses it to plan seating arrangements for banquets. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. This marriage to Lord Cassian, it is not an alliance. It is an acquisition. Argent's technology will be used to perfect the mandate's weapons of control. The Pacifista program will become unstoppable. I will not be the architect of the world's enslavement. She pointed to a single, small point on the schematic. Here, this is my chamber within the spire. During the peak of the ceremony, all external security will be at maximum. A direct assault is impossible. But, she zoomed in on a network of glowing lines. The energy conduits and data relays, they have blind spots. Flaws in their logic. A sufficiently unpredictable force could bypass them. You're not asking to be rescued, Vivi realized. Her eyes wide with admiration. You've planned your own extraction. Rescue implies helplessness, Serafina stated coolly. I am not helpless. I am, however, contained. I am offering you a deal. Captain Uzumaki. My strategic mind, my knowledge of advanced technology, and celestial navigation charts that can guide you to the end of the Grand Line. Everything I am, everything I know. In exchange for one thing. Your freedom, Naruto said. It wasn't a question. My freedom, she confirmed. Get me out of that tower, and I am yours to command. Naruto looked at her, at the brilliant, desperate plan laid out before them. He looked at Vivi, whose expression had shifted from caution to resolve. This wasn't just about saving a princess anymore. It was about preventing a powerful weapon from falling into the enemy's hands. It was strategy and morality, perfectly aligned. I was never going to leave you here anyway, Naruto said simply. He looked at the schematic, his eyes already tracing patterns. Seeing possibilities. But I love it when a plan comes together. All right, Princess Serafina, let's go steal you from your wedding. The night of the conjunction ceremony was a symphony of sterile grandeur. The Aegis spire glowed, a pillar of white light against the dark sky. Inside, the elite of Argent society mingled with a delegation of stiff, arrogant celestial mandate officials. Led by the handsome, smug Lord Cassian. On the Rasengan, the final preparations were made. Vivi was at a communications console Serafina had modified, ready to create a diplomatic diversion. Jiro and Ken were at the helm, the ship humming with power, ready to fly at a moment's notice. Naruto stood alone on the deck, dressed in a simple, dark outfit. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. He could feel the city's energy, a perfect, logical grid. He could feel the nervous excitement of the partygoers, the arrogance of Lord Cassian, and the cold, focused resolve of Serafina, waiting in her gilded cage. Phase 1, he whispered, and created a single shadow clone. The clone sprinted across the bridge connecting the spires and, with a theatrical yell, tried to force the main entrance to the Aegis spire. Alarms blared. Logic sentinels, sleek, floating constructs of silver and blue light, emerged and swiftly neutralized the clone, which dissolved in a puff of smoke. In the spire's security hub, the chief officer nodded in satisfaction. Predictable. A brute force attempt. The system has adapted. Nothing can get through the main entrance now. He was right. Wick. H is why the real Naruto was already inside. While the guards were distracted, Naruto had approached the base of the tower from below, clinging to the metallic underside. He slapped a complex fuinjutsu seal onto an energy conduit. The paper tag glowed with black characters, and for 0.7 seconds, a single sensor panel on the 15th floor went dead. In that sliver of time, Naruto used a flicker of wind chakra to propel himself through the now unprotected vent. He was in. The tower's interior was a maze of white corridors and silent machinery. He didn't run. He flowed, a shadow in a world of light. His sage mode was a super sense, allowing him to feel the patrol patterns of the sentinels, the invisible beams of the sensors. He moved in the gaps, the moments between the machine's thoughts. He came to a long hallway. Its floor a laser grid. A clone appeared, took one look at it, and started doing a series of ridiculous, acrobatic flips across the corridor, intentionally tripping beams and setting off silent alarms. The sentinels in the area immediately converged on the clone's position, their programming identifying it as the primary threat. While they were busy disintegrating his diversion, the real Naruto simply pushed open a ceiling panel and crawled through the ventilation shaft above the laser grid, completely ignored. Chaos, he thought with a smirk, was the ultimate logic bomb. He reached the upper levels. The domain of the ceremony. He could hear the music, the polite laughter. He found Serafina's chamber, its door a seamless slab of reinforced metal. He didn't try to force it. He placed another seal on the lock mechanism. This one wasn't for disruption, it was for resonance. He channeled a tiny, precise pulse of chakra into it. The tumblers inside the lock, designed to resist any physical or energy-based force, vibrated at a harmonic frequency and simply fell open. He slid the door open. Serafina was standing in the center of the room, dressed in a stunning, severe white gown. She held a small, metallic data slate. She didn't look surprised. "You were 1.4 seconds ahead of my projected arrival time," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Your methods are unorthodox. You're the one who told me to be unpredictable," Naruto said with a grin. He looked at her plan on the slate. "This is brilliant, by the way. Using their own energy grid to create a feedback loop, genius." Her cheeks colored slightly, the first genuine emotional response he'd seen from her. "The theory is sound. I lacked a catalyst with your unique energy signature to execute it." The connection between them in that moment was electric, a meeting of two vastly different but equally sharp minds. He, the master of chaotic action, she, the master of ordered strategy. They were two halves of a perfect whole. Suddenly, the door chimed. "Serafina, my dear, it is time," a smooth, arrogant voice called from the other side. "Lord Cassian." Serafina's composure returned. "It is time," she agreed. She looked at Naruto. Phase 3. She opened the door. Lord Cassian stood there, resplendent in his white and gold uniform, a smug smile on his face. His smile faltered when he saw Naruto standing casually in her room. "You, the pirate, guards," he shrieked. But before any guards could arrive, Serafina stepped forward and calmly slapped the data slate onto Cassian's chest. The device adhered to his uniform. "What is this?" he demanded, trying to pull it off. "A catalyst," Serafina said coolly. "Your body is now the focal point for a citywide energy cascade. I would advise you to stand very still." As if on cue, the lights in the spire flickered. A massive surge of energy, rerouted by Serafina's program, shot through the tower, converging on the slate. Lord Cassian lit up like a festival tree. His body convulsing as harmless but spectacular energy arced around him. The tower's primary systems shorted out. The impenetrable defenses went dead. In the confusion, Naruto grabbed Serafina's hand. "Let's go." They ran. Alarms were blaring for real now, but the sentinels were offline, the guards in disarray. They reached a grand balcony overlooking the city, the party goers staring in shock at the convulsing Lord Cassian. "There's nowhere to run, pirate," an Argent guard yelled, leveling his rifle. "Who said anything about running?" Naruto said. He pulled Serafina close, wrapped an arm around her waist, and jumped over the railing. Serafina didn't scream. She held on, her eyes wide, a look of pure, unadulterated freedom on her face as they plummeted thousands of feet. Below them, the Rasengan shot out from behind a spire, its crimson sail a beacon of rebellion. Naruto twisted in midair, creating a cushion of dense wind beneath them. They landed on the deck as softly as a feather. "Full power, Jiro," Naruto yelled. "Get us out of here." The Rasengan surged forward, banking hard and diving back towards the sea of clouds below, leaving the silent, shock Ed city of Argent and its sputtering defenses behind them. Serafina stood on the deck, the wind whipping her silver hair free from its severe braid. She looked back at her gilded cage, then at the endless horizon ahead. She was breathing heavily, a wild, brilliant smile on her face. She looked alive. "Analysis," she said, her voice filled with a giddy, unfamiliar emotion. Escape probability was 37.2%. Your chaotic influence resulted in a 100% success rate. The data is intoxicating. She turned to Naruto, her mercury eyes shining. My knowledge is yours, Captain. Where to next? In the golden, silent throne room of Marihoa. The sovereign, Izanagi, felt the disturbance. It was louder this time. The harmonious grid of argent had been fractured by a note of pure, untamed chaos. The betrothal, an act meant to bind a powerful asset to his world order, had been shattered. Uzumaki, he spoke, the name an exhalation of cold fury in the minds of the five elders. He does not merely defy. He dismantles. He frees. He infects others with his ideology of chaos. One of the elders bowed low. Sovereign, the reports are confirmed. He has abducted the Argent Princess. Lord Cassian was humiliated. Archon Theron has declared Naruto Uzumaki an enemy of the state. It is not enough, Izanagi's thought echoed, sharp as glass. This is no longer a matter for vice admirals and standard fleets. The sickness is spreading. We must deploy a more absolute cure. He raised a hand, and an image formed in the air before him. It was a blueprint of a new kind of weapon. Taller than a giant, forged of the AIM metal as crocodile's prison and powered by a captured fragment of light. It had no face, only a single, glowing lens. It was a killing machine, designed for one purpose: to hunt and nullify those with unique, godlike powers. Authorize the deployment of the Seraphim units, Izanagi commanded. Inform Admiral Kato his hunt is about to be augmented. The maelstrom must be becalmed. Permanently. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Voice of the Deep. The Rasengan, its hull gleaming with Argent's flawless repairs and its systems humming with new, subtle energies, clove through the waters of the new world. The sky above was a brilliant, endless blue, mirrored by the sea below. For the first time in weeks, the mood aboard the ship was light. Serafina had proven to be a revolutionary addition to the crew. She had integrated Argent's technology into the Rasengan systems, creating a hybrid of ancient chakra-based engineering and cutting-edge science. The ship was faster, more responsive, and the navigation console now displayed a three-dimensional, real-time holographic map of their surroundings, plotting currents and weather patterns with unnerving accuracy. She and Naruto had developed a fascinating rapport. They would spend hours on the deck, he explaining the esoteric principles of sage mode and the nature of chakra, she translating his feelings and instincts into algorithms and energy flow diagrams. It was a romance of the mind, a deep and thrilling connection between the world's most brilliant strategist and its most unpredictable force. Vivi, in turn, found a kindred spirit in Serafina. While Naruto was the ship's heart and Serafina its brain, Vivi was its conscience. She guided their path not just by the stars, but by the moral compass that Naruto's quest required. She cataloged the political fallout from their actions, intercepting and decrypting world government communications, keeping them one step ahead of the forces hunting them. The three of them, a maelstrom, a strategist, and a diplomat, formed a triumvirate of startling effectiveness. According to the celestial charts from Argent and the legend fragments from the Alabasta Royal Library, Serafina announced. Her fingers dancing across the holographic display, the path to the one freedom requires 3 poneglyphs of passage. Ancient markers left by your ancestors, Captain. The first is said to be located at coordinates that correspond to a depth of 10,000 meters. The sunken city of Ryugu, home of the fish men. Jiro, chewing his unlit cigar at the helm, grunted. Fish Man Island. Haven't been there in 30 years. Strange place. Beautiful, but always feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to go wrong. Naruto, who had been balancing on the railing while juggling 3 miniature Rasengans, caught them and dispelled them with a grin. 10,000 meters down, how are we supposed to get there? The ship isn't a submarine. It is now, Serafina said with a hint of pride. She tapped a command on her console. A low hum filled the air, and shimmering blue seals, a fusion of her technology and Naruto's fuinjutsu, spread across the ship's hull. I have created a stabilized pressure shield. It envelops the ship in a bubble of spatial distortion and breathable air. Theoretically, it can withstand the pressures of the deep sea. We will not be sailing to Ryugu. We will be falling. The descent was an experience beyond words. They passed from the sunlit world into a realm of deepening blue, then into a twilight zone where strange, bioluminescent creatures drifted past like forgotten dreams. Finally, they entered the abyss, a world of absolute blackness, the only light coming from the Rasengan's own ethereal glow. Then, they saw it. A colossal bubble of air, clinging to the sea floor like a giant dewdrop. Within it was a city of impossible beauty. Towers of sculpted coral in vibrant reds, blues, and yellows reached towards the top of the bubble, bathed in a soft, self-generated light. Schools of iridescent fish swam through the streets like birds. This was Ryugu, a paradise at the bottom of the world. As they passed through the bubble's membrane, THEY were met by an honor guard of fishmen soldiers, riding hippocampus-like sea steeds. They were led by the 3 princes of the kingdom, their expressions a mixture of awe at the ship and deep, underlying anxiety. Ryugu Palace was a magnificent structure of living coral and mother of pearl. King Neptune, a coelacanth merman of immense size and gentle disposition, welcomed them warmly. But his vile demeanor could not hide the fear in his eyes. "Princess Vivi, it is an honor," he boomed, his voice echoing in the vast throne room. "And you must be Naruto Uzumaki. The Maelstrom. Your exploits have reached even our ears. Down here in the dark." He gestured to a banquet table laden with exotic seafood. "Please, eat, rest. We will discuss the poneglyph when you are refreshed." The feast was lavish, the people of the palace kind and welcoming. But the atmosphere was undeniably tense. The guards were on high alert. Conversations were held in hushed tones. The paradise was clearly troubled. Naruto's sage mode felt it as a constant, low-frequency thrum of fear. It emanated from everyone, from the king down to the servants. But it was strongest from one source. During the feast, she was introduced. Princess Shirahoshi, the king's youngest daughter. She was a giant mermaid, so large she had to be gently guided into the throne room, her pink hair flowing around her like a living current. Her beauty was legendary, but it was her eyes that captured Naruto's attention. They were huge, innocent, and filled with a terror so profound it was heartbreaking. She flinched at loud noises and startled at sudden movements, her bottom lip often trembling. She was, as Jiro had said, holding her breath, terrified of what might happen if she let it out. Vivi leaned towards Naruto. "They call her the Mermaid Princess. She hasn't left the palace in 10 years. There's a stalker, a despicable pirate named Vanderdecken, who has been sending her threatening letters and weapons. She lives in constant fear for her life." Naruto watched her, his expression unreadable. He felt the stalker's obsessive malice, a dissonant note in the symphony of the city. But he also felt something else from her. A power, dormant and colossal, slumbering within the terrified princess like a dragon in a porcelain egg. It was a power that made Kurama, resting within him, stir with a low growl of primal recognition. Later, in a private chamber, King Neptune's jovial mask fell away. "The poneglyph is in the sea forest, a sacred place," he said, his voice heavy. "But I cannot allow you to go there now. It is too dangerous." "Vanderdecken?" Naruto asked. "He is a nuisance, a foul barnacle on our hull," the king sighed. "But no, there is a greater threat. A new fanatic has appeared in the new world. They call him the Purifier. A zealot of the celestial mandate, who believes he is on a holy crusade to eliminate any being who possesses, unregistered, godlike abilities. He has destroyed entire islands, claiming he is cleansing the world of false idols in the name of the sovereign." Serafina, looking up from a data slate, added, "His name is Inquisitor Malachi. Formerly a high-ranking member of the Cipher Pole divisions. He possesses the Null fruit. It doesn't grant him an elemental power, it allows him to create fields that negate the abilities of other fruit users and similar energy-based powers within his vicinity. He is a walking dead zone for people like Crocodile or Vice Admiral Kato. According to Mandate Intelligence, he is hunting a latent planetary threat in this region. Codename Poseidon." King Neptune flinched at the name. An ancient legend, a prophecy that one day a mermaid princess will be born with the ability to speak to the Sea Kings. To command them. Naruto's eyes widened. Sea Kings. The colossal, continent-sized monsters that ruled the deep. The thought of anyone commanding them was terrifying. He looked at Vivi, who looked back at him, a dawning horror and understanding in her eyes. "Shirahoshi," Naruto breathed. The king nodded, his face a mask of misery. She is the one. She has the power. She doesn't know it, not consciously. But when she was a child, a moment of extreme fear, she cried out, and a school of sea kings appeared from nowhere, nearly destroying the island by accident. She has been terrified of her own emotions ever since. She locks herself away, not just from Vanderdecken, but from herself. If this Inquisitor learns of her, he will not rest until he has purified her. This was the source of the island's fear. Not a stalker, but a looming genocide. They were hiding their most precious treasure, a girl with the power to move the world, terrified that her very existence would bring annihilation. Naruto stood up. I need to speak with her. The hard-shell tower was Shirahoshi's prison and sanctuary. Naruto entered her enormous room alone. She was curled up on her bed, weeping silently, her tears the size of cannonballs. Please, go away, she whimpered. Not even looking at him. I'm sorry. Please don't be angry. Naruto didn't approach her. He just sat down on the floor, a good distance away. I'm not angry, he said, his voice calm and gentle. I'm Naruto. It's nice to meet you. She peeked at him through her fingers. You're not here to shout at me. Why would I shout at you? He asked. Everyone does, she whispered. When I cry, they get scared. They tell me to stop. But I can't help it. I'm just a crybaby. Naruto smiled softly. I used to be a crybaby, too. This got her attention. She lowered her hands, looking at him with her huge, tear-filled eyes. Yep, he said. When I was a kid, I was alone. Everyone was scared of me. They whispered about me. They said there was a monster inside me. Shirahoshi's eyes widened in recognition. And for a long time, Naruto continued, his voice taking on a distant, sad quality, I believed them. I was scared of it, too. This monster. This power I couldn't control. I thought if I ever let it out, I'd destroy everything I cared about. He met her gaze, his blue eyes filled with an empathy so profound it was a tangible force. You have a monster inside you, too, don't you? Shirahoshi. She flinched, tears welling up again. I don't want it. I don't want to be Poseidon. I just want to be normal. I know, he said gently. But you can't get rid of it. It's a part of you. Just like the monster inside me is a part of me. He patted his stomach. His name is Kurama, by the way. He's a grumpy old fox, but he's not so bad once you get to know him. Inside Naruto, Kurama grumbled. Kid, do not compare my magnificent self to a blubbering child. Hush, you, Naruto thought back. You know exactly what this is like. Naruto looked at Shirahoshi, his expression serious. The scary part isn't the power, Shirahoshi. The scary part is being alone with it. I found people who weren't afraid of me. They helped me, and I learned to talk to my monster. We're partners now. He makes me strong, and I make sure we use that strength to protect people. He stood up and walked closer, stopping at the edge of her bed. He held out his hand. You're not alone anymore. Let us help you. His words, his shared experience, broke through a decade of fear. She saw in him not a hero or a pirate, but a reflection of her own lonely heart. For the first time, she wasn't just looking at him. She was seeing him. Hesitantly, she reached out her gigantic finger and gently touched his outstretched hand. The connection was small, fragile, but it was a start. The IR moment was shattered by a deafening alarm. A voice boomed over the palace's shell-shaped speakers. Intruder alert. Vanderdecken's ship, the Flying Dutchman, is approaching the island. And, oh gods, another fleet. White ships. It's the world government. Inquisitor Malachi stood on the deck of his lead ship, the Sanctifier. It was a stark, menacing vessel of black iron and gray sails, a stark contrast to the pristine white of the marine ships accompanying it. Malachi himself was a terrifying figure, gaunt and pale, dressed in the severe black robes of his order. His eyes burned with zealous fire. The heretical power signature is emanating from that island, he hissed, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. And the pirate Uzumaki is there. Two abominations in one place. The sovereign's will is clear. He raised a hand. Activate the null field. All units, prepare for purification. A low hum emanated from his ship, and a vast, invisible dome of energy began to spread out, enveloping the entire island of Ryugu. On the Rasengan, Serafina's console sparked. Captain, a powerful energy field is surrounding the island. It's interfering with my systems. The ship's shield is fluctuating. In the palace, Naruto felt it instantly. His connection to Sage Mode flickered and died. The natural energy of the world had been muted, muffled, as if a thick blanket had been thrown over it. He tried to summon a clone. Nothing happened. A wave of dizziness washed over him. He's nullifying chakra, Naruto gritted out, stunned. Just like the sea, the attack was two-pronged. Vanderdecken, a grotesque shark-fish man, used his Mark fruit ability to hurl his ship, the Flying Dutchman, directly at the hard-shell tower, intent on finally reaching Shirahoshi. Simultaneously, Malachi's forces began their assault on the island's perimeter, their weapons firing beams of energy that seemed to destabilize the very coral of the city. The Fishman Royal Guard fought bravely, but without their full strength. They were being pushed back. The island paradise was turning into a war zone. Shirahoshi, King Neptune boomed, rushing into the room. "We have to get you to safety." But Shirahoshi was frozen, her terror absolute. The explosions, the screaming, the sight of the Flying Dutchman hurtling towards her home, it was too much. She clutched her head and let out a piercing scream of pure, undiluted fear. And the world answered. Deep in the abyss, ancient eyes, larger than mountains, snapped open. The Sea Kings, who had slumbered for an age, heard the call of their queen. They began to move. Naruto, fighting through the disorienting effects of the null field, knew he had to act. He turned to the terrified princess. "Shirahoshi, listen to me. That scream, that's your power. You're calling them, but you have to control it. You have to tell them what to do." "I can't," she wailed. "I don't know how." "Yes, you can," Naruto insisted, his voice a bedrock of conviction in the chaos. "It's your voice, just like it's my fist. You just have to mean it. Tell them to protect your home. Tell them to stop the bad men." Vanderdecken's ship crashed into the hard-shell tower with a monstrous crunch. He leapt from the wreckage, a crazed look in his eyes. "Shirahoshi, my love, I've finally come for you." Naruto moved. Even without his chakra, his physical conditioning was superhuman. He intercepted Decken, tackling him away from the princess. They crashed through a wall, tumbling into the main throne room. It was a brawl now, pure muscle and grit. Outside, the battle raged. Malachi, his null field suppressing all abilities, walked through the battlefield like an untouchable god of anti-magic. He pointed a finger at a group of fish men. "Be cleansed." A beam of black light shot from his fingertip, and the fish men simply ceased. Not dead, but erased, their existence nullified. He was a walking void. He saw the Rasengan, its bubble shield flickering violently, and smiled. "An abomination of a ship. It shall be unmade." He prepared to fire. But then they came. The sea floor trembled. The water around the island began to churn, not from a storm, but from movement below. Colossal shapes, so large they blotted out all light, rose from the abyss. Sea Kings. Dozens of them. Their collective presence was so immense it physically warped the water around them, causing Malachi's null field to flicker and destabilize. On his ship, Kato, who had been forced to accompany the Inquisitor, stared at his radar, his face pale. What is this? The energy readings are off the scale. They're not lifeforms, they're geographical features that are moving. Inside the palace, Shirahoshi watched the chaos, her heart breaking. She saw Naruto, bleeding and bruised, fighting desperately to protect her. She saw her people being erased by the cold, cruel Inquisitor. She saw her home being torn apart. And she heard Naruto's words in her head, "It's your voice. You just have to mean it." The fear in her heart was still there. But for the first time, something else was growing alongside it. Anger. A fierce, protective rage. This was her home. These were her people, and she would not let them be harmed. She closed her eyes, not in fear, but in concentration. She took a deep breath, and this time, she didn't scream. She spoke. Her voice was a thought, a feeling, a command pushed out into the ocean. "Protect them." The Sea Kings responded. One, a serpent-like creature miles long, wrapped its body around Fishman Island, its scales forming an impenetrable shield against Malachi's fleet. Another, with a head like a monstrous frog, opened its mouth and simply swallowed the Flying Dutchman whole. The effect on Malachi's null field was catastrophic. The raw, eternal power of the Sea Kings was something his fruit could not comprehend or negate. It was the planet's own life force pushing back. The field shattered. Instantly, Naruto felt Sage Mode flood back into his senses. A surge of power, vibrant and alive, coursed through him. He grinned. My turn. He created 1,000 clones. They swarmed over Vanderdecken, subduing him in seconds. The real Naruto, now glowing with the combined power of Sage Mode and Kurama's chakra, shot out of the palace like a golden comet. He appeared before the Sanctifier. Inquisitor Malachi stared at him, his zealous calm finally broken by a sliver of fear. Abomination. You wanted to meet a god, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. You've got one. He raised his hand. An ultra-big ball Rasengan, the size of a small meteor, formed above him. Churning with immense power, he slammed it down on the Sanctifier. The black iron ship didn't just break, it was atomized, erased in a silent, blinding flash of blue light. The rest of Malachi's fleet, seeing their leader and his flagship obliterated, broke and fled. In the aftermath, a strange calm settled over Ryugu. The Sea Kings remained, silent, colossal guardians, waiting for the next command from their queen. Shirahoshi, exhausted but no longer terrified, floated in the throne room, a look of awe on her face. She had done it. She had controlled her power. Naruto stood before her, smiling. See, not so scary when you're the one in charge, is it? She gave him a watery, grateful smile. Thank you, Naruto-sama. You taught me how to be brave. The bond between them was no longer just empathy. It was a deep, protective affection from him, and a blossoming, heartfelt adoration from her. He hadn't just saved her, he had liberated her from her own fear. With the crisis averted, King Neptune gladly showed them the poneglyph in the serene sea forest. Serafina recorded its contents, her mind already cross-referencing it with her charts. The first piece of the puzzle was in place. As they prepared to leave, Shirahoshi came to see them off. I want to go with you, she said, her voice soft but firm. King Neptune balked. Shirahoshi, it's too dangerous. It is more dangerous to stay here and hide, father, she replied, her newfound confidence shining. My power, it is a threat to the world as long as the sovereign rules. But with Naruto-sama, it can be a tool for freedom. I want to see the world my mother dreamed of. A world where our people can live in the sun, alongside humans. She looked at Naruto. Please, let me lend you my voice. Naruto looked at the giant, gentle princess, who had found the heart of a queen. He looked at Vivi and Serafina, who both nodded in agreement. His crew of princesses was growing. A diplomat, a strategist, and now, a living legend with the power to command the gods of the deep. Welcome aboard, Princess Kairi, he said, using the name she had been given by her mother, a name that meant, ocean, a name she could finally grow into. Aboard his damaged flagship, Kato watched the Rasengan ascend back to the surface. He had disobeyed a direct order. He had not engaged. He had witnessed a heretic defend her home and a pirate act with more honor than the inquisitor he was forced to serve. His investigation into the world government's dark corners had already shaken his faith. But today, he had seen the truth. The Purifier program wasn't about justice, it was about exterminating any power that could challenge the sovereign. The absolute order he served was built on a foundation of lies and genocide. He turned to his communications officer. Send a coded, high-priority message. For Vice Admiral Smoker's eyes only. Sir. Kato's face was grim, his eyes hard as flint. His path was no longer clear. His unwavering justice had hit a wall of absolute corruption. He was a man of light, but he was beginning to realize he had been serving the darkness. The message is, the dragons are not the monsters. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Queen of the Forsaken. The new world greeted them with its teeth bared. The sea, once a predictable shade of blue, now shifted in color and temperament without warning. Islands of crackling lightning stood beside islands where gravity was a suggestion rather than a rule. The laws of nature had been rewritten by a mad god, and every pirate crew that survived here had to be just as mad. Naruto's grand fleet, as Jiro had wryly started calling their single, overpowered ship, was becoming a legend. Whispers followed them from island to island, the maelstrom of Uzu. The boy captain who had toppled a warlord, humiliated the celestial mandate, and commanded the loyalty of 3 powerful princesses. They were a symbol of a new kind of piracy, one not driven by greed, but by an ideology of radical freedom. And in the New World, ideologies were more dangerous than cannons. Their growing influence had put them on a collision course with one of the sea's established powers. Not the Navy, but a rival monarch. "We have a problem," Vivi announced, her face grim as she studied the holographic map in the Rasengan's strategy room. The chamber, once a simple storage hold, had been converted by Serafina into a nerve center. Maps, intelligence reports, and energy readings filled the air in shimmering displays. The next poneglyph of passage is on the island of Thera. But Thera is no longer unclaimed territory. It was recently conquered and now serves as the primary fortress for the Kuja pirates. Serafina brought up a file. An image of a woman with long, lustrous black hair, eyes as sharp and cold as obsidian, and a face of breathtaking, imperious beauty appeared. She wore practical leather armor adorned with serpentine motifs and carried a massive, ornate spear. The pirate queen, Lyra, former crown princess of the Kuja kingdom, Amazon Lily. Her official government designation is Empress, though her rivals call her the Forsaken Queen. Naruto leaned forward, intrigued. Forsaken? Why? 10 years ago, Vivi explained, her voice somber, the world government issued a buster call on her home island. The mood in the room grew heavy. A buster call was the government's most extreme military action, an indiscriminate naval bombardment that erased an island from the map. It was an act of pure, unadulterated annihilation. Why? Ken asked from the doorway, his knuckles white. The official reason was the Kuja's refusal to join the world government and their continued practice of unsanctioned hockey, Serafina stated, her tone clinical. The unofficial data suggests they were close to uncovering certain truths about the Void Century. Lyra was off-island during the attack. She returned to find her home a smoldering crater. Her people, her family, everyone was gone. Naruto's expression hardened. He knew that kind of loss. He knew what it was to return to a home that was nothing but ghosts and rubble, the legacy of his Uzumaki clan. She rebuilt, Vivi continued, a note of awe in her voice. She found the few surviving Kuja scattered across the seas. She forged them into a new kind of tribe, a pirate crew. The Kuja are all formidable warriors, masters of a unique form of hockey that can be imbued into their weapons. Under Lyra's leadership, they have become one of the most feared forces in the New World. They've conquered a dozen islands, creating a small, heavily defended empire. Serafina brought up another display, showing fleet formations and battle records. Her ideology is a direct response to her trauma. She believes in absolute strength and total isolation. Alliances are a weakness. Trust is a vulnerability. The only path to security is to be strong enough that no one can ever touch you again. She ushes any perceived threat without mercy or negotiation. She's a mirror, Naruto said softly, his gaze fixed on Lyra's image. A reflection of what I could have become if I had let the loneliness win. He looked at Vivi, Serafina, and thought of Kairi, who was currently in her custom-built hydro chamber, learning to communicate more clearly with her colossal friends. He had chosen connection. Lyra had chosen solitude. She sees our growing fleet and our ideology of coalition building as a threat to her isolationism, Vivi concluded. She has issued a proclamation. We are to surrender the Orain princesses to her custody and turn back, or she will consider our presence in her territory an act of war. Naruto was silent for a moment. He could feel the weight of Lyra's story, the crushing logic of her philosophy born from unimaginable pain. We can't turn back. The poneglyph is on Thera. But I'm not going to fight her for it if I don't have to. He looked at Vivi. Can we talk to her? Unlikely, Serafina interjected. Her response to diplomatic overtures has a 100% hostility rate. She trusts no one, least of all those who talk of unity. To her, that's the language the world government used right before they destroyed her home. Then we'll give her no choice but to talk, Naruto decided, his eyes glinting with resolve. We'll go to Thera. We won't go in guns blazing. Well, I'll make it clear we're here for the poneglyph and nothing else. We'll show her we're not a threat. But we won't back down. Thera was an island of jagged, volcanic rock and lush, unnervingly silent jungles. The Kuja had transformed it into a fortress. Watchtowers carved to look like coiled serpents dotted the cliffs, and a fleet of swift, deadly-looking ships patrolled the coastline. As the Rasengan approached, a single Kuja ship detached from the patrol and sped towards them. At its prow stood Lyra herself, her black hair whipping in the wind, her spear held loosely in one hand. She was even more formidable in person, her presence radiating an aura of immense power and profound, unyielding sorrow. It was a potent combination of conqueror's haki and deep-seated grief. "You are Naruto Uzumaki," she called out, her voice carrying across the water, as sharp and clear as a blade. It was not a question. "And you are Queen Lyra," Naruto called back, standing on his own prow. "We've come for the poneglyph on your island. We have no quarrel with you or your people." Lyra laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. "You have a ship full of princesses and talk of peace. You sound just like them. The smiling diplomats who promised my ancestors prosperity right before their cannons opened fire." Her eyes, cold as the void, swept over Vivi and Serafina on the deck behind Naruto. "You co-lect broken crowns and promised them a new kingdom. How is your rule any different from the sovereign's? It's just a different cage." "I'm not a ruler," Naruto replied, his voice even. "And this isn't a kingdom. It's a choice. They are here because they chose to be. Freedom isn't about being alone, Lyra. It's about being able to choose who you stand with." "A pretty sentiment," she sneered. "But words are wind. In the new world, only strength matters. This is your only warning. Turn back. My empire was forged in the ashes of pretty words. And my quest was born from them," Naruto shot back. "We're not leaving." Lyra's expression hardened. The air crackled with tension. "So be it." She raised her spear. The tip began to glow with a faint, purple light, the physical manifestation of her haki. "You have chosen war with the Kuja. You will regret it." She lowered her spear, and her ship turned back to the island. The challenge had been issued. The battle began not with a cannonade, but with a challenge. Lyra proposed a Davy-back fight, an ancient pirate tradition, but with her own brutal twist. It would not be a series of games. It would be a single, winner-take-all confrontation. Captain versus captain. If Naruto won, he would get access to the poneglyph. If Lyra won, she would claim his ship and his entire crew. "It's a trap," Serafina warned, her holographic displays showing tactical weaknesses in the proposal. "She means to isolate you from us. Her mastery of haki is legendary. At close quarters, she is considered one of the most dangerous combatants alive." "I know," Naruto said, stretching his arms. "But it's also a chance to end this without a war. If I refuse, she'll see it as cowardice and attack our fleet anyway. This way, the fight is on our terms. Just me and her." He looked at his crew, his expression confident. "Besides, it sounds like fun." The duel was to take place on a flat, barren mesa on the coast of Thera. Naruto arrived alone, leaping from the deck of the Rasengan to the shore. Lyra was already there, standing in the center of the mesa, her spear planted in the ground beside her. Her elite Kuja warriors stood in a silent, disciplined circle around the dueling ground. "You came alone," Lyra noted, a flicker of surprise in her obsidian eyes. "You have courage. I will grant you that. This is between us," Naruto said simply, walking forward. "Queens, kings, captains. It's our job to bleed so our people don't have to. Right?" His words seemed to strike a nerve. A flicker of something other than anger, perhaps reluctant respect, crossed her face before her mask of cold indifference slammed back down. "Enough talk. Let us see if your strength matches your conviction." She pulled her spear from the ground. Naruto settled into a low stance. The air grew still. The Kuja warriors watched, their expressions unreadable. From the deck of the Rasengan, Vivi, Serafina, and Ken watched through a powerful telescope, their hearts pounding. The fight exploded. Lyra was a whirlwind of controlled violence. She didn't have a devil fruit or flashy ninjutsu. She had pure, perfected martial prowess and a mastery of haki that was breathtaking. Her spear was an extension of her body, a blur of purple-black energy that struck like a viper. Every thrust, every parry, was aimed with lethal precision. Naruto was her equal in speed and agility, dodging and weaving through the storm of her attacks. He was in sage mode, his senses screaming warnings at him, allowing him to anticipate her moves just a fraction of a second before she made them. He formed a Rasengan and lunged. Lyra didn't dodge, she met it head-on. She coated the shaft of her spear in a dense layer of armament haki, so thick it looked like polished obsidian. She blocked the Rasengan, the sphere of grinding chakra screeching against the haki-infused weapon. The ground beneath them cracked from the sheer force of the impact, but her spear held. "Your parlor tricks are useless against true haki," she grunted, pushing him back. The duel was a clash of philosophies. Naruto's fluid, unpredictable, nature-infused sage arts against her rigid, unyielding, will-powered haki. He was a flowing river. She was an immovable mountain. He created a dozen clones. They attacked from all sides. Lyra moved like a dancer in a storm, her spear a blur, dispelling each clone with a single, precise strike to its core. But it was a feint. While she was occupied, the real Naruto gathered a massive amount of wind chakra in his hand. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. He didn't throw it, he thrust the miniature, shrieking shuriken of wind forward. Lyra's eyes widened. She knew she couldn't block this one. Instead of retreating, she did something unexpected. She dropped her spear, slammed her hands together, and roared. A wave of pure, unadulterated willpower erupted from her. Conqueror's haki. It was not a gentle pressure, it was a physical, concussive blast. The less solid clones around her were instantly vaporized. The Rasenshuriken itself wavered, its form destabilized by the sheer force of her will. The blast hit Naruto head-on. It wasn't a physical blow, but it felt like one, an attempt to overwhelm his spirit. To force him to his knees. He gritted his teeth, his own will, honed by a lifetime of fighting against despair, rising to meet it. He felt Kurama's power surge within him. A roar of defiance against her command. He held his ground. The stalemate was broken by Lyra. She used the opening to retrieve her spear and lunge, aiming for his heart. Naruto, still fighting off the dregs of her haki blast, managed to twist at the last second. The spearhead, glowing with purple energy, pierced his shoulder instead, pinning him. The pain was immense, the haki-infused blade disrupting his chakra flow. Slowing his healing, Lyra stood over him, her face inches from his, her eyes burning with a cold, triumphant fire. "It is over," she said, her voice low. "Your will is strong, but mine was forged in the fires of annihilation. You cannot win." She prepared to deliver the final blow. "You're right," Naruto gasped, blood trickling from his lips. "I can't win by destroying you. You've already lost too much." His words stopped her. She stared at him, confused. "I'm not trying to beat you, Lyra," he said, his voice raw but sincere. "I'm trying to show you that you don't have to be alone." He looked past her, his gaze widening in genuine alarm. "Look out." Lyra instinctively glanced over her shoulder. It was a classic misdirection, but Naruto's tone was so utterly genuine she fell for it. In that split second, Naruto's pinned body dissolved into a puff of smoke. A wood clone. The real Naruto appeared behind her, emerging from the ground where he had hidden using a substitution jutsu. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a Rasengan. He just chopped the back of her neck with a precise, chakra-infused strike. It was the same move he'd used on Baron von Hesse. Simple, effective, undignified. Lyra's obsidian eyes widened in shock, not from the blow, but from the realization that she had been so thoroughly outplayed. Her formidable haki couldn't predict an attack. That came from a place of such profound empathy and trickery. Her consciousness faded, and she crumpled. Naruto caught her before she hit the ground, gently lowering her to the dusty earth. He stood over her, breathing heavily, his shoulder throbbing from the phantom pain of the clone's wound. The Kuja warriors stood frozen, their spears held ready, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. They were waiting for his next move. Would he kill their queen? Claim his prize? Suddenly, the sky darkened. A shadow fell over the island. It wasn't a cloud, it was a fleet, dozens of ships, but they weren't Kuja vessels. They were pristine, white marine ships, led by a single, massive, state-of-the-art flagship. On the bridge of that flagship, Admiral Kato stared at the scene on the mesa below, his face grim. An aide stood beside him, holding a communication transponder. A cold, officious voice was issuing from it. Admiral Kato, your orders are confirmed. The pirate queen Lyra and the insurgent Naruto Uzumaki are both present. You are authorized to deploy the new Pacifista Mark III units. Eradicate both pirate crews. The sovereign's justice must be absolute. Kato looked at the new weapons lining his ship's deck. They were 7-foot-tall automatons, their bodies polished to a mirror sheen, their faces blank save for a single, glowing red lens. They were an evolution of the old models, faster, stronger, and programmed with the fighting styles of various masters. A new, more terrifying addition was a device on their wrists designed to project a localized version of the null field. Sir, the aide asked, waiting for the command. Kato looked down at the mesa. He saw Naruto Uzumaki standing protectively over the unconscious form of his rival. He saw the Kuja warriors forming a defensive circle, not against Naruto, but against the new, greater threat. He saw two factions that had been trying to kill each other moments before, now united by a common enemy. An enemy Kato represented. Belay that order, Kato said, his voice dangerously quiet. Sir, Central Command was explicit. I said, belay the order. Kato snapped. He looked at the island of Amazon Lily on his map, AP. Lace the Kuja warriors still called home, a place inhabited by non-combatants, a place now well within his firing range. The unwritten part of his orders was clear: if the pirates resisted, level the island. Another buster call, another round of absolute justice. The voice from the transponder grew colder. Admiral, your hesitation is being noted. If you will not execute the will of the world government, we have units in place who will. As if on cue, from behind the fleet, a smaller, faster squadron of black ships emerged. The Seraphim units, Azanagi's personal hounds. They were under the direct command of the Five Elders, and they answered to no admiral. The lead Seraphim pilot's voice, metallic and devoid of emotion, came over the main channel. Admiral Kato, you are relieved of command of this operation. Targeting systems locked on Amazon Lily. Commencing orbital bombardment protocol on my mark. This was it, the final straw, the moment Kato's entire world, his entire belief system, shattered. He had dedicated his life to a justice that had just threatened to annihilate a civilian island to get at two pirates. It wasn't justice, it was tyranny. All ships, Kato roared, high-s voice filled with a fury and conviction he hadn't felt in years. Target the Seraphim squadron. Fire at will. The bridge crew stared at him in stunned disbelief. That is an order. On the mesa, Naruto saw the chaos erupting in the sky. He saw the white marine ships turning on the black ones. He saw a man in a white admiral's coat, standing on the prow of the lead ship, glowing with a brilliant light as he single-handedly intercepted a volley of energy blasts aimed at the island. Lyra began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, her head pounding. The first thing she saw was Naruto, not gloating over her, but standing over her. His gaze fixed on the battle in the sky. She saw her warriors, ready to defend her. And she saw the Navy, her sworn enemies, fighting an even darker version of themselves to protect her home. Her entire worldview, built on the simple, brutal truth that the world was against her, was fracturing. What is happening? She rasped. Looks like we have a mutual friend, Naruto said, not looking down at her. He made a hand seal. 1,000 clones appeared on the beach, their hands already glowing with Rasengans. And a new enemy. He offered a hand down to Lyra. I beat you. By the rules of your challenge, your crew and your ship are mine. So here's my first order as your new captain. Get up. We've got a war to win. Lyra stared at his outstretched hand. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't enslaving her. He was inviting her. He was treating her not as a conquered foe, but as an equal, an ally. His ideology of connection, which she had scorned as a weakness, was now her only hope. She took his hand. As he pulled her to her feet, a bond was forged. Not of romance, not yet, but of something deeper. A grudging, fiery respect between two monarchs who had ared into the abyss and chosen different paths, only to find them converging in the heat of battle. The pacifistas are landing, Ken's voice yelled from the Rasengan. The sleek, silver automatons dropped from the sky. their landings cushioned by jets of flame. They rose to their full height, their red eyes scanning, identifying targets. They were an army of relentless, unfeeling death. Kuja, Lyra roared, her voice regaining its power. 2 arms. Show these puppets the wrath of the Forsaken. Naruto grinned, cracking his knuckles. All right, princesses and pirates. Time to dance. He charged, leading the Kuja warriors and his own clones in a desperate counterattack against the metal tide, while in the skies above, a disgraced admiral and his loyal crew waged a hopeless war against their OWN masters for a justice they had just realized was a lie. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Sovereign's Wrath. The battle for Thera was not a battle, it was a meat grinder. The Pacifista Mark IIIs were everything the reports had promised and more. They were relentless, tireless, and terrifyingly adaptive. They moved with the fluid grace of master martial artists, their metallic limbs striking with bone-shattering force. The null field projectors on their wrists were the true nightmare, creating localized dead zones that caused a Kuja warrior's hockey-infused arrow to lose its power mid-flight, or on of Naruto's clones to destabilize and pop before it could even land a blow. Naruto was a blur of motion, a golden gale sweeping across the battlefield. He couldn't afford grand, chakra-heavy techniques. The null fields were too numerous, flickering on and off, creating a treacherous, invisible minefield. One wrong step and his sage mode would wink out, leaving him blind and vulnerable. So he fought with taijutsu, with kunai and explosive tags, with the raw, brawling instinct of a shinobi. He was a force of chaos, disrupting the Pacifista's logical attack patterns, drawing their fire, creating openings for the Kuja. Lyra was his dark counterpart, a whirlwind of focused fury. She had abandoned her spear, which was too slow, and now fought with a pair of wicked, curved blades. Her haki was a palpable force, a cloak of sheer will that allowed her to sense the activation of the null fields and strike in the fractions of a second when the machines were vulnerable. She moved through the robot army like a reaper, her blades a silver blur, dismantling the automatons with ruthless efficiency. They fought back to back, an instinctive, unspoken alliance forged in the crucible of combat. Old use a gust of wind to throw a pacifista off balance, she would decapitate it before it could recover. She would shatter the armor on a unit's chest, he would shove a Rasengan into its exposed core. They were chaos and order, instinct and precision, Maelstrom and Empress, fighting as one. The fiery tension that had defined their duel was now reforged into a powerful, grudging respect. He saw the queen beneath her rage, the fierce protector who would die for her people. She saw the king beneath his grin, the indomitable will that refused to bow to despair. In the heat of battle, a spark of something more than respect began to smolder between them. From the deck of the Rasengan, the princesses commanded their own front. Vivi, her diplomatic skills useless against machines, had become a field commander. Coordinating the Kuja warriors with Naruto's clones, her voice clear and steady over the communication shells, directing squads to exploit weaknesses Lyra and Naruto created. Serafina was locked in a cyber war. Her fingers flew across a holographic interface, her mind a whirlwind of code and strategy. Their command network is a closed loop, but it has a single master control sign. Al originating from the Seraphim squadron leader. I can't break the encryption, but I can disrupt it. She slammed a final command into the console, flooding their network with phantom data. It won't stop them, but it should introduce a 0.8-second lag in their adaptive combat protocols. That 0.8-second lag was a lifetime. On the battlefield, a pacifista froze for less than a second, its targeting solution scrambling. It was all the opening a Kuja warrior needed to drive an arrow through its optical sensor. Meanwhile, the war in the sky was a portrait of beautiful, hopeless defiance. Admiral Kato, now a traitor to the world he had served, was a god of light. He transformed his body into pure, blinding energy, moving at impossible speeds, a living laser beam that lanced through the black hulls of the Seraphim ships. His flagship, the Saint, Justicia, and the few loyal crews that had followed his insane order, fought with the ferocity of the damned, their cannons blazing, buying the island below precious time. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Seraphim were the sovereign's personal wrath, their weapons designed to tear through fleets. One by one, Kato's support ships were crippled. their white sails turning to black smoke. "Admiral, our shields are failing." His first mate yelled over the scream of tearing metal. "We can't hold out." Kato solidified on his bridge, his white coat torn. His face streaked with soot. He watched the battle below, watched Naruto and Lyra fighting to protect their people. He had made his choice. "Our job is not to win," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound truer justice. "It is to give them a chance to." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the Rasengan." On the Rasengan's bridge, Kato's face appeared on a holographic screen. "Princess Serafina," he said, his voice strained but clear. "I have analyzed the Seraphim's energy signatures. Their primary weapon requires a massive power conduit that runs through the flagship. It is shielded, but my power, the glimmer fruit, I believe I can phase through the shielding and overload it from the inside. It will create a chain reaction. It will destroy the entire Seraphim squadron." Serafina's eyes widened. "The feedback would be catastrophic. You would be at the epicenter of the explosion. There is a 0% probability of survival." A sad smile touched Kato's lips. "I know." He looked past her, his gaze seeming to find Naruto on the battlefield below. Tell him I finally understand. Justice isn't a set of rules. It's a choice. And this is mine." The transmission cut out. Before anyone could react, they saw it. Kato's flagship made a suicidal charge at the Seraphim command vessel. The admiral himself became a spear of pure, blinding light, shooting from his ship and piercing the hull of the enemy flagship. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Seraphim flagship swelled, a sun being born in the sky. A silent, terrifying explosion of white light and pure energy erupted outwards, vaporizing the flagship and catching the rest of the black-sailed squadron in its blast. In an instant, the Sovereign's elite hunters were wiped from the sky. On the battlefield, the effect was immediate. The pacifistas, their master control signal severed, froze. They stood motionless for a 5-second count, then their internal programming defaulted. Their red eyes glowed brighter. A new directive took over. Seek and destroy all non-mandate life forms. Annihilate the island. They were no longer an army. They were a virus. They began to fire indiscriminately. Their weapons tearing through the jungle, their only goal to sterilize Thera. But the temporary lull had been enough. A deep, resonant hum echoed from the sea, a sound that vibrated in the bones. The water began to churn as colossal shapes rose from the depths. Kairi, standing on the deck of the Rasengan with her eyes closed in concentration, had called for aid. The Sea Kings arrived. One, with a shell like a mountain range, simply rose up beneath half of the remaining pacifista units, lifting them into the air and then smashing them against the cliffs. Another, a moray eel the size of a train, surged onto the beach and swallowed a dozen of the machines whole, its armored gullet grinding them to scrap. It was a battle of monsters versus machines, nature's raw power against technological terror. With the tide turned, Naruto took a deep breath. It was time to end this. He gathered every ounce of sage energy he could, Kurama's chakra surging to mix with it, eating a cloak of golden-orange fire around him. He rose into the air, a living sun. Below him, Lyra watched, her heart pounding. She had never witnessed power on this scale, so raw and yet so controlled. It was the power of a true conqueror, yet he used it only to protect. Naruto created 2 clones. The 3 of them brought their hands together. The shriek of the Rasenshuriken returned, but this time it was different. Fused with the immense power of the 9 tails, it was no longer just wind. It was a miniature, raging typhoon of golden energy, a tailed beast bomb Rasenshuriken. "Everyone, get down," he roared. He threw it. It didn't fly towards a target. It detonated in the air above the battlefield, exploding into 1,000 smaller blades of energy that rained down like a meteor shower. Each blade was a homing missile of sage art, intelligently seeking out the chakra signature of the pacifista's cores and avoiding all life. The world became a storm of golden light and screaming energy. When it faded, the battlefield was silent. The remaining pacifistas were smoking husks, each with a perfect, fist-sized hole drilled through its center. The battle was over. The cost had been high. Dozens of Kuja warriors lay dead or wounded. Kato and his loyalists were gone, a noble sacrifice that had turned the tide. But they had won. In the aftermath, a new order was forged. Lyra, her pride humbled and her worldview shattered, stood before Naruto amidst the wreckage. "You have won," she said, her voice quiet, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "My life, my crew, my empire, they belong to you. What is your command, Captain?" Quote. Naruto looked at her, at the fierce, broken queen who had finally bent her knee. He saw not a subordinate to command, but an equal to stand beside. "My command is this," he said, his voice firm. "Stand up. Your empire is your own. Your life is your own. Your people are your own." He offered her a hand, not as a conqueror to his vassal, but as one leader to another. "But your war is now our war. The enemy that destroyed your home is the same enemy I am sworn to defeat. Stop fighting the world alone. Fight with us." Tears welled in Lyra's obsidian eyes. The first she had shed since she was a child. They were not tears of sadness, but of a profound, earth-shattering relief. The burden of vengeance, the crushing weight of her self-imposed isolation, was finally lifted. She was no longer forsaken. She had found a new tribe. "I will," she whispered, taking his hand. In that moment, Naruto Uzumaki's grand fleet was truly born. It was no longer a single ship. It was a coalition, an alliance of Uzumaki shinobi, Alabastan royals, Argent strategists, Ryugu mystics, and now, the unbowed warriors of the Kuja. It was a fleet united not by a flag, but by a shared dream of a world without chains. Marihoa did not tremble. It was beyond such mortal frailties. But within the Chamber of Thrones, the stillness was the quiet of a universe holding its breath before a supernova. The five elders stood before the empty throne, their faces for the first time showing not just concern, but something akin to fear. "The Seraphim Squadron, erased," one elder breathed. "The Pacifista Army, annihilated. Admiral Kato, a traitor. The Kuja Empress, allied with the Uzumaki boy." "He is no longer a boy," another corrected, his voice grim. "He is a symbol, a rallion, G-point for all who would defy the natural order. He collects dissenters like a magnet collects iron filings. He is building an army." The presence of the sovereign filled the room, cold and immense. His anger was not a fiery, passionate thing. It was a pressure, a gravitational force that bent the very light in the chamber. Izanagi was silent for a long moment, processing the cascade of failures. His instruments of order had been broken. His agents of justice had defected. The very fabric of his perfect world was being unraveled, thread by thread, by a single, chaotic anomaly. "This maelstrom has been allowed to grow into a hurricane," his thought impressed upon them, colder than the void. "My will has been interpreted by lesser beings, by admirals and inquisitors. Their methods are insufficient." He rose from his unseen throne, a figure of pure, terrifying authority. The world outside the chamber windows seemed to dim, the clouds themselves bowing to his presence. "The time for intermediaries is over. If a weed continues to grow, you do not simply trim its leaves. You rip it out of the ground, root and stem. And you salt the earth upon which it grew." The sovereign raised a hand. A tremor, not of the earth but of reality itself, shook the foundations of the red line. Far below, the sea began to churn. The tectonic plates groaned, with a sound that was heard and felt across the globe. A sound of groaning continents and screaming reality. The holy city of Marihoa, the continent-sized fortress of the celestial mandate, detached from the red line. It tore itself free from the planet's crust, rising into the sky on a tide of impossible power, a floating continent of gold and marble, a throne world for a god. "He has built an army," Izanagi's voice echoed across his rising kingdom. "Then I shall bring my kingdom to him. He seeks the final poneglyph. He seeks the one freedom. He will find only me." Across the world, the sea went mad. Tsunamis crashed against shores. The magnetic field spun wildly. The sky itself seemed to fracture as the planet's largest landmass ascended into the heavens. Aboard the newly christened flagship of the Grand Fleet, the Rasengan II, a Kuja warship refitted by Serafina. The alarms blared, seismic activity off the charts. Serafina yelled, her usual calm shattered by the sheer impossibility of the data flooding her screens. "The red line, it's breaking apart. No, that's not right. It's rising. The entire holy city is ascending." Everyone rushed to the deck. They looked up and saw it. A new star in the sky, a point of golden light that grew larger and larger, resolving itself into a floating continent that blocked out the sun. Naruto stared up at the impossible sight, his sage mode screaming at him, feeling a power so vast, so absolute. It made the Sea Kings feel like goldfish. It was the power of a true god, a being who treated the planet as his personal plaything. He felt the sovereign's gaze lock onto him from across the sea. A focused beam of utter annihilation. This was it, the final act. The enemy was no longer sending his pawns. The king himself had entered the board. So, Naruto said, a slow, dangerous grin eating across his face as he stared up at the floating continent. He finally decided to come out and play. He turned to his crew, to his queens. Vivi, her face pale but resolute. Serafina, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and scientific fascination. Kairi, her hands clasped, ready to call her guardians. And Lyra, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade, her eyes burning with a warrior's fire. Looks like the final battle is coming to us, Naruto announced, his voice ringing with unshakable confidence. Let's not keep him waiting. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The King of the Pirates. The world held its breath. The floating continent of Marihoa, a golden sword of Damocles, hung in the sky, casting a shadow of divine authority across the sea. It was not merely a fortress, it was a declaration. A statement that the laws of man, of nature, of physics itself, were subject to the will of the sovereign. Below, the grand fleet of the Maelstrom King was a tapestry of defiance. The sleek, chakra wood hull of the Rasengan II was at its heart, flanked by the serpent-headed warships of the Kuja. Alabastan cruisers, flying the royal crest, held the rear, their decks manned by the king's own royal guard. Sent by a grateful father. Skiffs from Argent, piloted by a small faction of engineers Serafina had inspired to rebel, zipped between the larger ships, their energy shields humming. And in the depths below, colossal shadows moved in silent, synchronized grace, the Sea Kings, a navy of living gods sworn to Kairi's will. It was an impossible alliance, a fleet of dreams and rebellions united against the cold, hard reality of absolute order. Naruto stood on the prow of his flagship, the wind whipping through his golden hair. He was not alone. His queen stood with him. Vivi, in the uniform of an Alabastan fleet commander, her gaze sharp and strategic. Serafina, her silver hair flowing free, a holographic command interface shimmering around her wrists. Kairi, her gentle face say, "Chi," with a powerful resolve she had never known before. And Lyra, in her Kuja battle armor, her hand resting on his shoulder, a silent promise of shared strength. Their bond, forged in separate fires and now united, was a palpable force. A quiet strength that radiated through the entire fleet. "He's waiting," Lyra said, her voice a low growl. "He wants us to break ourselves against his walls. The atmospheric energy readings are stable." Serafina analyzed, her eyes darting across data streams. "He's projecting an immense field of power, but it's passive. It's a shield, not a weapon. He is inviting us to attack. It's a trap." "It is more than a trap," Vivi added, her eyes on the Golden City. "It's a test of faith. He wants to show the world that even our combined strength is nothing. He wants to crush not just our fleet, but the very idea of hope." Naruto listened, then smiled. "Good. That means he's arrogant." He turned to them, his blue eyes blazing with a light that rivaled the Golden City above. "He thinks this is a battle of power levels, of ships and weapons. He's wrong. This has always been a battle of wills. His will to control versus our will to be free." He raised his hand. Across the fleet, thousands of eyes turned to him. "He wants to crush our hope." Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by wind chakra, carrying to every ship. "Then we'll show him a hope so stubborn it can crack the heavens. He wants us to break against his walls. Then we'll hit him with a wave so big it will wash his Golden City clean." A roar of defiance answered him, 1,000 voices from a dozen nations, all crying out as one. "Kairi," Naruto commanded. Kairi closed her eyes. She reached out, not with a shout, but with a gentle, powerful thought. "Rise." The sea answered. Directly beneath Marihoa, the ocean began to bulge upwards. A pillar of water, miles wide, surged into the sky, a reverse waterfall of impossible scale. It was not an attack, it was a pathway. The Sea Kings, their immense Bodies forming the structure of the column were lifting a piece of the ocean itself into the sky. Serafina, get us up there. Naruto yelled. Aye, Captain. Serafina called back, her voice alive with exhilaration. The Argent skiffs swarmed the fleet, projecting interlocking energy fields that stabilized the ships as they entered the massive water spout. The Grand Fleet began its ascent, sailing up a vertical river towards the domain of a god. From his throne within the Pangaea castle, Izanagi watched their approach. The 5 elders stood beside him, their faces pale. They are using the ocean itself as a siege engine. One elder whispered in disbelief. This is illogical. It is chaos. Izanagi's thought corrected him, his expression unchanging. The desperate, final thrashings of a woe. RLD that does not comprehend the beauty of order. Let them come. Let them witness the futility of their struggle firsthand. As the fleet reached the edge of the floating continent, the battle began. Izanagi did not send an army. He simply changed the rules. The air around the fleet grew thick, heavy. Gravity is increasing by a factor of 10. Serafina shouted, her console bleeding red alerts. The ships groaned, their hulls creaking under the immense pressure. At the same time, the water of their spout began to freeze from the top down, the cold radiating from the golden land. He is trying to crush us and freeze us at the same time. Vivi yelled, but Naruto was prepared. He slammed his palms together. Sage art. Massive Rasengan barrage. Hundreds of clones appeared on the decks, critiquing and launching a constant stream of Rasengans. They didn't strike the island. They struck the freezing water, the churning chakra keeping it liquid. Simultaneously, Naruto funneled immense amounts of wind chakra into the Argent energy fields, creating a counter-pressure that fought back against the crushing gravity. It was a battle of attrition. The fleet was a single organism, fighting to survive. The Kuja warriors fired Haki-infused arrows to shatter constructs of pure energy that Izanagi formed in the air. The Alabastan Guard used their cannons to blast apart chunks of rock the Sovereign tore from the island's edge and hurled at them. We can't win a battle of resources against him. Lyra gritted out, her own Haki a visible, crackling aura as she helped shield the flagship. He has the whole damn island to throw at us. We don't have to win. Naruto countered, sweat beading on his brow from the immense effort. We just have to get through. He looked at his queens. It's time. They moved as one. Lyra and Vivi took command of the fleet's defense, a perfect fusion of tactical fury and strategic command, holding the line against Izanagi's passive assault. Serafina, Kairi, and Naruto were the tip of the spear. Serafina activated a personal flight device, a marvel of Argent engineering, and shot towards the island, weaving through the chaos. Kairi leapt into the water, her colossal Sea King allies forming a protective phalanx around her. And Naruto, cloaked in his golden Kurama Sage mode, simply leapt, his body a comet of unstoppable will. The 3 of them breached He outer defenses and landed on the pristine, unnervingly perfect soil of Marihoa. But the real battle was just beginning. Izanagi didn't fight them. He changed their reality. Naruto lunged, and the ground beneath him turned to liquid. Swallowing his attack, Serafina fired a plasma blast, and the air in front of it became a perfect vacuum, robbing the blast of its medium. Kairi called to the life force of the island, and found only a sterile, artificial energy. He's not a fighter, Serafina realized, her mind racing. He's the operating system. He doesn't follow the laws of physics, he writes them. They were in his world, playing by his rules. Brute force was useless. They were herded, not by enemies, but by the shifting, unforgiving landscape, towards the center of the island, towards the Pangaea castle. The doors swung open, inviting them in. They found him on his throne, in a chamber so vast it seemed to hold the sky itself. Izanagi looked at them, not with anger, but with a profound, weary disappointment. You have caused so much needless noise, he said, his voice now audible, a calm, resonant baritone that filled the chamber. All this struggle, all this passion, for what? To replace my perfect, quiet order with your loud, messy chaos. Freedom isn't messy, Naruto shot back, standing firm before the god. It's just alive, something you wouldn't understand. I understand it all too well, Izanagi said, a flicker of ancient sadness in his star-like eyes. I was once like you. I believed in freedom. I watched as it led to war, to famine, to self-destruction. I saw mortals, given liberty, inevitably choose to harm one another. My tyranny, as you call it, has brought centuries of stability. I have saved more lives by imposing order than you ever could by championing chaos. That's not living, it's surviving. Naruto roared. You've put the whole world in a cage and told them it's a sanctuary. And what is your alternative? Izanagi asked, a genuine question. You depose me. You shatter the mandate. What then? Do you believe the world will simply hold hands? Warlords will rise. Kingdoms will wage war. Your precious freedom will be a banquet for the strong to feast upon the weak. You will have traded one god for 1,000 petty tyrants. His words were intelligent, his logic almost seductive. He was not a monster. He was a fallen hero, a being so terrified of the world's capacity for self-destruction that he had taken it upon himself to save it from itself. He was the ultimate moral dilemma. And this was the final battle. Not of fists, but of philosophies. It was not Naruto who answered him first. You are wrong, Serafina said, stepping forward, her voice clear and strong. You see only two options, your rigid order, or total chaos. It's a false dichotomy. The universe is not a binary system. We don't need a ruler. We need balance. We need architects, gardeners, navigators. People who guide, not command. You speak of guidance, Izanagi countered. But who chooses the guides? Who stops them from becoming tyrants themselves? We do, Lyra's voice boomed. She and Vivi had breached the castle, striding into the throne room, their armor battered but their spirits unbroken. We, the people, by holding them accountable, your system has no accountability. You are an absolute, an error with no correction protocol. And what of those, say, who are too weak to hold anyone accountable? Izanagi challenged. Then the strong will protect them. Vivi declared, her hand on her sword. Not out of obligation, but out of compassion. You have built a world without compassion. A world of rules without a heart. A kingdom is its people, not its king. You have forgotten that. Compassion is an emotion, Izanagi dismissed. It is illogical, unreliable. The cry of a child is illogical, Kairi said softly, her voice the most powerful in the room. The love for a home is unreliable. But they are the most real things in the world. You have severed yourself from the world's heart. Sovereign, you are the one who is truly alone. Izanagi looked at them, at this council of princesses, this chorus of defiance. A warrior, a diplomat, a mystic, a strategist. They were not Naruto's harem. They were his pillars, each representing a core component of a better world. Strength, empathy, wisdom, and heart. And he looked at Naruto, the chaotic center who had brought them all together. You see, Naruto said, a proud, fierce grin on his face. This is what freedom looks like. It's not just me, it's us. We'll figure it out. We'll make mistakes. It'll be loud and messy and beautiful. But it will be ours. For the first time, a fissure of doubt appeared in Izanagi's divine composure. He saw their unity, their unbreakable, illogical bond. And Chi terrified him more than any Rasengan could. His perfect, ordered world had no defense against this. No, he whispered, his voice losing its calm. It is an aberration, an infection. It must be purged. He rose from his throne. And his full power was unleashed. The world within the chamber dissolved into a maelstrom of unreality. He wasn't attacking them. He was trying to delete them from existence. But the princesses were not damsels. They were anchors. Vivi's unwavering hope acted as a psychic shield, her belief in her people and her new comrades a beacon of reality that kept them from being unmade. Lyra's raw haki, her sheer force of will, punched holes in Izanagi's reality warping, creating moments of stability. Serafina's mind, a supercomputer of strategic thought, analyzed the flux, calling out the patterns in the god's chaos. His power is based on conceptual imposition. He defines what is real. We have to introduce a concept he can't define. And Kairi, her heart connected to the planet, reached out. Not to the sterile floor of the castle, but to the life force of the world far below. She called upon the raw, chaotic, untamable energy of nature itself, a force older than any god. The floor of the throne room cracked, and a single, green vine pushed its way through, a tiny, indomitable piece of the real world invading Izanagi's sterile domain. Izanagi screamed, a sound of pure agony. As this sliver of true, chaotic life disrupted his perfect order. This was the opening Naruto needed. He realized he couldn't destroy a concept. He couldn't kill a law of physics. He could perform the ultimate act of an Uzumaki. He could unseal it. He plunged his hands into the crack in the floor, drawing on the raw, natural energy Kairi had summoned. He mixed it with Kurama's life force and his own. He was not forming a weapon of destruction. He was weaving the most complex Fuinjutsu seal ever conceived. A seal not to contain, but to deconstruct. To unravel. You tried to save the world by taking its freedom. Naruto grunted, his body glowing with an energy that was beyond divine. But you don't get it. Freedom is the world. It's the only rule that matters. He clapped his hands together. Seal of liberation. Genesis unbound. A wave of intricate, golden characters erupted from him. It was not an explosion. It was a wave of truth. It did not destroy Izanagi's power, it simply disconnected him from it. It severed the cord between the man and the god fruit he had consumed millennia ago. It reminded his power what it was, a part of the world, not its master. Izanagi froze. The light in his eyes faded, replaced by the simple, terrified blue of a mortal man. His white robes seemed to hang off a frame that was suddenly frail. He stumbled back, looking at his hands, feeling the loss of a power he had wielded for eons. He was no longer a god. He was just a man. A very old, very tired man. With his fall, the floating continent began to groan, its power source gone. It started to descend, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Serafina, Naruto yelled. On it. She was already at a console that had materialized from the wall, her fingers a blur, fighting to stabilize the falling landmass. To guide its descent into an empty stretch of ocean where it would do no harm. The world had been saved. They found the final poneglyph, not in a vault, but right there, behind the throne. It spoke of the one freedom. It wasn't a treasure. It wasn't a weapon. It was an ancient, global-scale Uzumaki seal, with its final key located on the last island, Laugh Tale. A seal designed to do one thing: shatter the red line, the physical barrier that had divided the world for 800 years. They reached Laugh Tale a week later. There, on a sun-drenched shore, Naruto placed his hand on the final key. With his queens by his side, he activated the seal. Across the world, the red line, the great, impassable continent, trembled. Then, with a groan that shook the planet, it crumbled. Not into rubble, but into sand, peacefully sinking beneath the waves. The four blues and the grand line merged. The world, for the first time in history, was truly one. One piece, one ocean, one world. Naruto Uzumaki was declared the Pirate King. Not a title of rule, but of liberation. The king who had freed the world. Epilogue. Years later, the world was indeed messy. It was loud, but it was beautiful. New nations rose, old kingdoms flourished. There were disputes, there were struggles, but there was no single, oppressive thumb holding them all down. A world council, with Vivi as its first elected chairwoman, guided the new era of cooperation. On the deck of the Rasengan II, a man with sun-bleached golden hair laughed, dodging a playful spray of water from a Lao. Ji-Hing mermaid princess the size of a small building. A silver-haired woman adjusted a telescope, a small smile on her face as she mapped a new star system. A raven-haired queen sparred with a blue-haired diplomat on the main deck. Their blades ringing in the clear air. Naruto Uzumaki, the Pirate King, watched his family, his partners, his queens. Theirs was a love story for the new age, a bond not of ownership but of profound mutual respect and shared adventure. He looked out at the horizon, a single, unbroken line that circled the entire world. The sea was calm today. It was free. His adventure wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 7 End.